Chapter 21:17. In any case, this person was already a dead person in her eyes. The woman rolled back and forth on the ground. At this moment, her face had already been burned beyond recognition, and there wasn't a single patch of skin left untouched. Enveloped in a layer of black flames, she reached out to touch her face in horror. When she touched her face, she discovered that her eyes, nose, and eyebrows were all on fire, and her face was in excruciating pain. The fire on her face was much smaller than the fire on her body. Like a frog being boiled in warm water, it continued to burn her face, but didn't go any further and turn her face into something like a pancake. Ah! The woman scurried and rolled all over the floor. Wherever she rolled, the people there would indifferently take a step back. They watched her perform her tumbling skills in the central room by herself. Arbor was speechless. He suddenly reached out and sprinkled a snow pearl, which whooshed down beside the woman. When the snow pearl touched the sacred fire, the layers of black flames enveloping the woman's body quickly and obediently retreated. Emolien's anger still hadn't subsided. She tightly gripped the little fellow's hand, and her voice contained a hint of anger. Why did you save her? She doesn't know the difference between life and death. Just burn her alive. Arbor hurriedly reached out to comfort him. He blinked and said, I still have something to ask her. You filthy woman, you lowly slut. I won't tell you anything. I definitely won't betray my master. You only know how to flaunt your prowess by relying on men. You bitch. A beam of wood spirit instantly struck her mouth, knocking out a mouthful of her teeth. What do you want to hear from her if her mouth stinks? Hichin said unhappily. Arbor saw the anger on everyone's faces. He couldn't help but wave his hand and say, Why are you bickering with a dead person? Let me ask her first. Bah. The woman, whose teeth had fallen out, felt that she couldn't even speak properly. She angrily snorted and said, In your dreams. Didn't you say that I flaunt my prowess by relying on men? Then I'll give you a chance to challenge me, Arbor coldly interrupted her. As long as you defeat me, I'll let you go. How about it? The woman's expression froze, but she did not notice that behind her, Manor Head Gung was shaking his head vigorously. He couldn't speak, but he wanted to remind this woman. Arbor coldly glanced at Manor Head Gung, revealing a cold and resolute expression. Gung Pengcheng, this old fox still wants to trick me? It was obvious that he wasn't telling the truth. He was quite loyal to the person behind him. If it wasn't for the fact that she felt that she wouldn't be able to dig out any useful information from Gung Pengcheng, why would she deliberately set up a small trap to lure him into the trap? Sure enough, leaving Gung Pengcheng in the room, someone really barged in like a fool that night. The woman in front of him didn't even seem to have half of Gung Pengcheng's intelligence. The woman hesitated, but she didn't turn around to look at Manor Head Gung, so she didn't notice the anxious look on Manor Head Gung's face as he silently called out to her. All right. I promise you. The woman nodded heavily. Now she could feel that the auras of the people around the girl were light, but their auras were extremely heavy. It was obvious that the people around her were all people with extremely high cultivations. And this damn girl in front of her was only relying on those people's power to be so arrogant and despotic. Master had already told them about this. That girl had been raised in the countryside since she was young. She was already extremely lucky to have been able to trigger her meridians in this lifetime. Chapter 21:18. Could it be that she was delusional enough to think she could break through to the spirit realm? Or even the god realm? Ah, don't joke around. She was merely a good-for-nothing who was raised in the countryside. Without the help of those people with extremely high cultivation, what could she do? Gung Pengcheng's pupils abruptly contracted, and his expression changed from anxious to nervous to angry, embarrassed, and disappointed. Finally, his face turned ashen. If the woman in black was willing to turn her head to look at him, she would definitely find his appearance extremely fascinating. Meanwhile, Gung Pengcheng's current thoughts were, Can't this damn idiot turn her head to look at me? It's too bad I can't speak. Manor Head Gung felt like he was about to suffocate to death. He glared angrily at that conceited woman and wished for nothing more than to howl at the sky. Idiot! Who would dare to provoke you like this if they didn't have some skill? Judging from this woman's disdainful attitude, it was obvious. She didn't care about the little stoic in front of her at all. She would definitely suffer a loss and be tricked right now. The two of them flew out of the dilapidated shack and stood in a small clearing in the front yard. This dilapidated residence was extremely dilapidated, and there was a small, abandoned nursery in the front yard. The woman's face was burned beyond recognition. She stood next to the abandoned nursery with narrowed eyes, glaring fiercely at Arbor in front of her. Ha! The woman took out a double-edged blade from her inner world with a wave of her hand. The sharp blade emitted a faint black light in the darkness. Don't blame the heavens and accuse others if you seek your own death. Arbor glanced at her coldly and didn't say anything. He reached out and grabbed the ferrule in his hand. It's still unknown who will win and who will lose. Don't be overconfident. You'll know whether I'm overconfident or not after we fight. The woman in black shouted angrily, and the double-edged blade was flung out of her hand with a whoosh. It spun in Arbor's direction. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The sound of wind followed. Xiaomu didn't even dodge. Instead, she directly stretched out a small lustrous hand and formed a spiritual energy defense circle around her, blocking the double-faced blade that was spinning rapidly toward her. Huff 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 huff. The double-faced blade was blocked by the airflow, making it even harder for it to advance. However, it didn't last long against Arbor's spiritual power. It suddenly turned around and returned to the black-clothed woman's hand. The black-clothed woman's aura was extremely swift and fierce as she slashed out with her saber wind. Arbor didn't even look at her. With a slight movement of his body, he had already escaped from her saber wind. After a few times, the woman also knew that her movements were flexible, and her footwork was one of a kind in the world. If she relied solely on speed, it was absolutely impossible for her to catch up to this stoic face in front of her. The black-clothed woman's eyes flashed. Then she threw out dozens of paper charms from under her sleeves. Then she threw them in front of Arbor. All the talismans were shaken away in front of Arbor. The talisman power was vast and mighty, and it simultaneously pressed down on Arbor. Arbor didn't feel surprised, as if she had already seen through the woman's identity. She merely hooked the corners of her mouth coldly, and her fingers moved swiftly. Several hundred talismans were then flung out by her, and they all rushed toward the talisman power that was sweeping over. The black-clothed woman was completely stunned this time. She stood there dumbfounded in shock. What was going on? This little slut in front of her was actually a rare talisman master? If not, how could she have so many talismans on her body? Chapter 21:19. He casually tossed out hundreds of talismans and all of them were released? A talisman master? Even a talisman master couldn't be so generous. How difficult was it for a talisman master to draw talismans? Even her master couldn't be so extravagant. It was as if it was a complete waste of resources. And how could a woman from the lower star region become a talisman master? This absolutely didn't make sense. The black-clothed woman's eyes trembled as she exclaimed, how is this possible? Where did the talismans on you come from? Arbor glanced at her coldly and said indifferently, it has nothing to do with you. You're from a talisman patrician family, right? Arbor's words weren't a question but a confirmation. A cold light flickered in the depths of her eyes as she tapped the ferrule in her hand. Tell me, how should I deal with you, The woman didn't speak, but the emotions flowing from her eyes had already revealed everything. She was indeed from a talisman patrician family. In a flash, a trace of coldness flitted across Arbor's eyes. Go to hell. The black-clothed woman screamed in anger and humiliation. She abruptly took out a black talisman filled with many strange characters from her inner world. Slut. Today let me teach you a lesson. What is called ignorant arrogance and narrow-minded. With that, the talisman suddenly turned into a stream of light and flew in Arbor's direction. A puppet talisman. Arbor recognized it at a glance. Displaying one's slight skill in front of an expert, actually using a puppet talisman in front of her. Did she think a puppet talisman of this level would be able to trick her? Simply laughable. Arbor took a step forward and arrived in front of the black-clothed woman. She completely ignored the light from the talisman and directly flung her sleeve, sending her flying. The woman was immediately stunned. She simply didn't expect Arbor to be able to break the power of a talisman. How was this possible? This wasn't an ordinary talisman, but a puppet talisman. Who could break the power of a puppet talisman? Only. The black-clothed woman's pupils constricted and she almost cried out involuntarily, You're a charm master. You're a talisman master, This slut was actually a terrifying existence like a charm master? Arbor's cold voice rang in her ears. Congratulations, you got it right. Let me show you what a charm is. Arbor coldly stared at the woman. With a wave of his sleeve, dozens of profound talismans flew out, turning into a dozen or so streaks of black light that rushed towards the woman. His speed was extremely shocking, causing the woman to be dazed and unable to move as she fell to the ground. Since her identity as a charm master had been exposed, there was no need for this woman to continue living. With a flick of her finger, Xiao Mu guided those several dozen streaks of light from talismans into the woman's body. How could the woman in black dodge? In the blink of an eye, she had already been hit by dozens of talisman lights. With a miserable howl, she slid along the ground and rolled several times. A gloomy chill emerged from the soles of his feet. This was a very frightening feeling. It wasn't ice cold but a bone-chilling cold. This kind of cold was completely different from being attacked by a water spirit. The woman in black's entire body trembled, and she couldn't stop trembling from the depths of her bones. Chapter 21:20. She curled up into a ball and stared at Arbor with terrified eyes. No, that's impossible. How could this be? She had lost a mouthful of teeth to He-Chin earlier, and now that the yin energy had entered her body, her speech became increasingly unclear. Arbor didn't waste any more words with her. She walked over to her with a cold expression and raised several dozen icicles in her hand. You can die now. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. The black-clothed woman shrieked, trembling. I can tell you who sent me. Don't kill me. Arbor's expression relaxed slightly. Yes, it really is a talisman patrician clan. It's that one from our Mu clan. The woman's throat was suddenly struck by a streak of black light. She fell backward and sprawled on the ground with a thump. Her eyes widened and her mouth gaped open. Beads of blood gurgled out of her throat, and in a flash she lost all signs of life. Arbor abruptly turned her head and glared viciously at Gung Pengcheng in the dungeon. At this time, Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord Gung Pengcheng had already swelled up in the dungeon. Not good, he's going to self-detonate his spiritual sense. Shi-Chen flitted past and arrived in front of Xiao Mu. He grabbed her wrist and yanked her entire petite body backward. Mo Lien and the little Tai Sui had already joined forces and set up a defensive barrier in front of everyone. Let's go. Everyone quickly retreated. As for Gung Pengcheng, his faint soul projection had already swelled so much that it was impossible to make out his original appearance. What a prefecture, Lord Gung, He-Chin sneered. This person is really courageous. How could an ordinary person be willing to self-detonate their spiritual sense and seek their own destruction? Once their spiritual sense self-detonated, not even a shard of their soul would be left behind. To put it bluntly, their entire person would disappear from the world. They wouldn't even have a chance to be reborn. In order to prevent the black-clothed woman from revealing the mastermind behind her actions, Gung Pengcheng had already done all this. For Gung Pengcheng to be able to reach such a level, it was truly impressive. Boom. Boom. Following the loud explosion, everyone felt the ground under their feet shake a few times. Dao Wuji and the others covered their eyes with their hands and took a few steps back. This kind of spiritual awareness self-detonation was more than 3 times stronger than the self-detonation of the main body. Gung Pengcheng, this little spirit master, had also fought to a certain extent. He wondered how the person behind the scenes whom he was trying so hard to protect had managed to subdue such a loyal person. Does the Divine Prefecture's talisman patrician family have anything to do with the Heavenly Fate cult? Little Tai Sui suddenly asked. Ma Chin shook her head. I can't be sure about this. There's no concrete evidence to prove that the talisman aristocratic family is related to the Heavenly Fate organization. Of course. In the future we might be able to prove it. Everyone turned to look at Arbor. They saw her pursing her lips tightly, and her stoic little face clearly had a very displeased expression. Jojo, now we can be absolutely sure that someone doesn't want you to return to the Mu family of Shenzhou. Mo Lien pulled on her little hand and said indifferently, this person has always been hiding in the Mu family of Shenzhou. Even if we investigate in the future, we have a definite direction. The follow-up is only a matter of time. Mo Lien's soft comforting words entered Arbor's ears. Hearing this she nodded. After a long while, she said indifferently, I lost this round. Chapter 21-22. When she raised her head, she discovered that Arbor had already left at some point. Jojo said he's lacking some mid-grade medicinal ingredients, so he dragged Mo Lien to the pharmacy to buy them. Yellow Crane Fairy asked with a puzzled expression. Jojo wants to refine pills? Emin, the Peony Fairy waved a small red brocade fan, lazily leaning on the armchair. Shaking the fan, she nodded and said, Jojo seems to be lacking something. What is it called? 3 leaves, 3-leaf clover? Mid-grade medicinal ingredients? 3-leaf flower. Yellow Crane Fairy said with black lines on her forehead. Ah, right, it's that 3-leaf flower. Yellow Crane suddenly stared blankly, excitedly grabbing Peony's hand and shouting, Sister Peony, Could it be that Jojo is refining spirit-gathering pills? Peony was dumbfounded by her question. How could she know what kind of pill Arbor wanted to refine by buying that nuisance three-leaf clover? However, being called sister by Yellow Crane, she was somewhat elated. Thus, she smiled amiably at Yellow Crane and said, "Probably. I'll go take a look." Yellow Crane Fairy immediately jumped up and said with a face full of excitement, Hey, come back, come back." The Peony Fairy hurriedly reached out and grabbed her, pressing her back into the chair. "What are you going to do? The young couple is shopping and you're going to be a lit candle. If boss sees you, he definitely won't be happy." Yellow Crane Fairy was a bit stunned by what she said. "Kiki, I just want to observe her refining pills and learn from her experience." "Hey, then wait for her to come back." The Peony Fairy rolled her eyes at her. "She can't stay on the street refining pills, right?" "Okay then. Then, Sister Peony, I'll go read first." The dazed Yellow Crane Fairy nodded, then picked up the medical book and read it as if she was intoxicated. The corner of Peony's mouth twitched and she looked at her speechlessly. An ignorant and incompetent person like her would have a headache whenever she flipped open a book. There was no need to ask her to read books in this lifetime. It was impossible for her to be like Fairy Huang He, who was completely immersed in the medicine encyclopedia. That would be impossible, even in her next life. On the other side, Prince Emo and Miss Chow were strolling on the streets hand in hand, and they turned a blind eye to the gazes of the passers-by. The passers-by were also somewhat amused. A young lad who didn't look where he was walking and only stared at the little stoic actually bumped his head into someone else's shoulder pole. He rubbed his forehead in pain and was about to cry. When she saw a Liangyuan medicine shop in the distance, Xiao Mu stopped and sniffed. "Lian, I smell a very fragrant radish biscuit." The little thing was hungry. Emolian couldn't help but laugh. She raised her hand to stroke the little fellow's head and pointed to the alley next to them. "Then I'll go and buy it, okay?" Miss Chow nodded. "Then wait for me at the pharmacy." "Okay." Arbor naturally nodded cheerfully and agreed. After waving goodbye to Emolian, the little fellow walked toward Liangyuan Pharmacy with light steps. This Liangyuan Pharmacy was located in a troublesome area, so its business was naturally excellent. The pharmacy's shopkeeper was a rare person with a conscience. Even when the plants were withering and medicinal herbs were in short supply, he still insisted on not raising the price. As a result, many people from other cities came here especially to buy his medicinal herbs after hearing his reputation. As soon as Arbor walked through the door, a shop assistant immediately walked over with a face full of smiles and enthusiasm. "Hello, customer. Welcome, welcome." Chapter 21-24. Both of them looked wealthy and slightly plump. Their clothes were also very exquisite, and it could be seen that they were women from wealthy families. Arbor glanced at them and shook her head. "It's not a gift." The young woman's round face immediately revealed disdain. She stared at the Tian Xingzi with drooping leaves in front of Arbor and said, "This thing's leaves are drooping. It's already rotten." Arbor blinked and glanced at the Tian Xingzi again. She couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the mother and daughter and said to the shop assistant standing awkwardly at the side, "How much?" "Wrap it up." The young woman snickered. She moved closer to her mother and said disdainfully, "Mom, don't be like this in the future. Don't even ask about that kind of trash. If we're going to buy it, we'll buy the best. Don't buy this kind of trash. It's not like our family doesn't have money." That little stoic really looked like an immortal, but the things she did really made people look down on her. That "wrap it up, how much?" made her seem like a nouveau riche and bought something extremely precious. It was truly hilarious. It was only a pot of rotten vegetation. The young woman swept Arbor a disdainful glance. Arbor didn't take her contempt seriously. In any case, she knew best whether she had money or not. Why did she have to go around announcing to the world, "I have money, I have money"? She was simply like a moron. It was fine as long as she had a good life. As for what other people thought, what did it have to do with her? If they wanted to despise her, then despise her. She was bored to death. "Miss, this medicinal herb, cough, even our shopkeeper doesn't know what it is." The shop assistant scratched his head and said sincerely, "Are you sure you want to buy it? But it doesn't look like it can live for much longer." "It's fine, I'll buy it," Arbor said with a wave of her small hand. "How much?" "This, 1 spirit coin is enough." "And all right, buy it." Arbor had the shop assistant wrap up the pot of Tian Xingzi. In reality, she was extremely happy on the inside. Fuck, a pot of neurotoxin's main catalyst was actually sold for 1 spirit coin. This is a kind of black-grade medicinal ingredient, dear. TSK looks like I have to study more in the future. Only by studying more can I become cultured. Only by studying more can I not be deceived no matter where I go. The ancients didn't lie to me. The little fellow was secretly smug, but the mother and daughter kept looking at Arbor with strange eyes. The middle-aged woman felt that there was something wrong with the little stoic in front of her. Otherwise, why would he spend a spirit coin to buy a pot of dying unknown plants? What a joke. The young woman sneered, her face full of disapproval. Xiang. A man's voice came from the second floor. A young man walked up the stairs and quickly walked to Zhang Wuxiang's side. His face was filled with a doting smile. Those medicinal herbs have been packed. Is there anything else you like? Brother Wu. The young woman shyly took his hand and shook her head with a smile. It's almost done. We've bought everything we need. Wu Genie also nodded. His gaze suddenly landed on the little stoic, and for a moment, he was dumbstruck as if he had seen a celestial being. Zhang Wuxiang couldn't help glaring angrily at Arbor. She shook Wu Genie's arm and stomped her feet, saying delicately, Brother Wu, what are you looking at? Chapter 21-25. Wu Jin also hurriedly regained his wits and couldn't resist sneaking a peek at the expressionless Arbor. He mumbled with a chuckle, Nothing. Zhang Wuxiang couldn't help but feel resentful. She was originally a very average-looking woman, and her figure was also slightly plump. Normally she was the one who chased after Wu Jin. Wu Jin was also the only son of Shentian Prefecture's influential Heavenly Fortune sect's faction master. If it weren't for the fact that her family background was comparable to his and that sect master Wu valued their Great Source Island's power, their marriage might not have been successful. She hadn't married into the family yet, but Wu Jin had several beautiful handmaidens by his side. Her appearance wasn't beautiful enough, and her figure wasn't graceful enough, so she naturally could only work on other aspects. For example, her pill refinement skills were definitely something that could make people sit up and take notice of her. Even the Wu family's father and son had no choice but to properly flatter her when they needed her help. Brother Wu, let's go. Wu Jin also glanced at the little stoic again and said absent-mindedly, Xiang, didn't you say earlier that you also took a fancy to a medicinal herb on the second floor? What's it called again? I think it's called soul-chasing. Soul-chasing grass. Zhang Wuxiang said with a smile, It's too expensive. This yellow-grade medicinal herb costs 2,000 spirit coins. I thought about it and decided to pass. Zhang Wuxiang sighed and said, After all, my current pill refinement skills haven't broken through to yellow-grade yet. If I fail in refining, it'll be a considerable loss. Let's take a look in 3 months. At that time, my pill refinement skills might have already broken through to yellow grade. Okay. Wu Jin also nodded very happily and said, If Dad knows that your pill refinement skills have broken through to yellow grade alchemist level, he'll definitely be very happy. Zhang Wuxiang nodded non-committally and said with a smile, I think so too. After saying that, she swept a glance at the little stoic who was still strolling around on the side and involuntarily sneered. So what if she was good-looking? She was still a brainless fellow. A pauper who was only fit to buy junk when shopping. The little stoic was merely waiting for her dear husband. In any case, she had nothing to do, so she strolled through the second floor again. Zhang Wuxiang saw that Wu Jin's eyes had been involuntarily attracted to them. She couldn't help but mock him coldly, It's useless no matter how many times you walk around. If you don't have money, you still don't have money. Looking at them won't make them yours. Wu Jin was also stunned. He hurriedly pulled Zhang Wuxiang's sleeve and said rather awkwardly, Xiang, others are shopping. It's inconvenient for us to disturb them. Let's go. What are you buying? Zhang Wuxiang sneered mockingly. She spent a long time choosing and only chose a pot of rotten leaves. He had already walked around the second floor 3 times. A pot of rotten leaves for 1 spirit coin. That's all I can buy. When Wu Jin also saw the little stoic's gaze shoot towards him, he couldn't help but feel even more embarrassed. Zhang Wuxiang's mocking face was really ugly. It was other people's business whether they bought or not. Her mocking words were truly meddling in other people's business. Arbor glanced at her in boredom and walked to the side without consulting the shop assistant. She took that pot of Tian Xingzi from him and stored it into her inner world with a wave of her hand. The shop assistant still said rather awkwardly, Miss, once our medicinal ingredients are sold, we don't accept returns. Arbor absent-mindedly glanced at that shop assistant. Chapter 21-26. Was she afraid that she would race Tian Xingzi to death after returning home? Her heart ached for that 1 spirit coin and she would come back to find trouble with their pharmacy? Arbor was baffled. Was she such a senseless person? Even if she did raise him to death, it was just a matter of one spirit coin. Was it worth her making a trip back? Zhang Wuxiang sneered again. The little stoic turned to glance at her and rolled her eyes. Woman, do you have a blocked nose? If you're sick, it's better to treat it as soon as possible. If the nose is blocked, the heat will descend and the lung will descend. It's easy to develop lung disease. If you don't treat a minor illness, you'll suffer from a major illness. Let me give you a word of advice. Treat it properly. Madame Zhang and Zhang Wuxiang were instantly flabbergasted. After reacting for a while, Zhang Wuxiang said angrily, "What did you say? What kind of attitude are you speaking to me with? Do you know who I am?" What kind of attitude was this? Her attitude was too good. I'm telling you. I'm the third miss of Hongyuan Island, Zhang Wuxiang. You better be careful. A bitch who doesn't filter her mouth won't live long. Arbor creased her brows. Why did the name Hongyuan Island sound a bit familiar? Xiang? Wu Jini hastily pulled back the impulsive and easily angered Zhang Wuxiang and said with a frown, "Stop fooling around." She was buying medicinal herbs for no reason, yet she was being a busybody and provoking her time and time again. Anyone would feel uncomfortable. When Zhang Wuxiang saw that Wu Jini kept speaking up for the little stoic, the fury in her heart swelled. Flustered and exasperated, she flung Wu Jini's hand away and shouted, "Brother Wu, why do you keep speaking up for that bitch? I'm the third miss of Hongyuan Island. She's just a country girl who popped out of nowhere, yet she dares to hoot in front of me. How can I not teach her a lesson? You don't have money, yet you're still pretending to be a big shot. You bought a pot of lousy plants and still think you're a nouveau riche. Simply." Zhang Wuxiang's voice suddenly stopped, and her eyes widened as she stared at the man in an ink robe who gradually appeared in front of her at the top of the stairs. Dressed in ink robes, his tall and slender figure, his exquisite features seemed to have stolen the heavens' fortune and could instantly steal another person's breath. Heavens, heavens! How could there be such a handsome man in the world? Compared to the man in the black shirt, Wu Jini, who was standing beside him, was simply too ordinary. If he were to fall into a crowd, he wouldn't even make a splash. Zhang Wuxiang stared fixedly at Emolian. That gaze of hers was as if she wanted to see a hole in his face. She had never seen such a beautiful man in her entire life. His slender and jade-like figure walked over like a flower parting a willow. For a moment, the scenery in front of her seemed to have lost its natural color. All that was left in her eyes was a smiling man. Qiao Mu's gaze landed completely on the packet of carrot pancakes that Emolian was carrying. She ran over with a cheer and hooked her arm around his, asking, "Hubby, why did you take so long to buy them?" She had already walked around the second floor 3 times out of boredom, but this guy was still late. Jojo was not happy. "Oh, I met 2 vicious dogs on the way, so I taught them a lesson. That's why I'm late." Emolian raised his hand and patted the little fellow's head. The 2 of them carried the radish pancakes to the side as if there was no one else around. They put the radish pancakes on the small cabinet where the Tian Xingzi potted plant was placed. Emolian opened the oiled paper wrapping outside and took out a hot radish pancake. He smiled and handed it to Arbor. "Here, try it." Chapter 21-27. The little fellow opened her mouth and took a small bite. It was hot and she kept fanning her mouth with her little hand. She nodded and said, "Delicious." Emolian nodded with a smile. Then she also took a bite of the radish pancake. "My efforts were not in vain. The taste is not bad." Suddenly, an ear-piercing voice came from beside him. "Shameless." Xiang. Wu Jin was about to go crazy. In the past, Xiang was not so ignorant. Why was she meddling in other people's business today? That young Master Mo Shan did not look like someone to be trifled with. Xiang behavior was simply testing the bottom line of his patience. Qiao Mu turned her head to look at her and creased her brows in annoyance. She wrapped up the remaining carrot pancakes again and stuffed them into her inner world before pulling Emolian's hand to walk downstairs. "Hubby, let's go." There was no need to talk nonsense with a fool. It was simply a waste of his energy. "Let's wait downstairs. I bought a lot of medicinal herbs." A piece of lousy grass worth a spirit coin is called a lot of medicinal herbs. "Xiang." Wu Jin impatiently said, "You are too outrageous." "Brother Wu." Zhang Wuxiang did not expect Wu Jin to reprimand her face. Her eyes were filled with tears. She cried out in grievance, "You actually said this about your fiancée for a shameless bitch. You are also bewitched by her, aren't you? Who does she think she is? I am the third miss of Hongyuan Island. That bitch looks like a vixen. What does she have to compare with me?" Emolien abruptly turned his head around, and two serene rays shot out from his pair of severe phoenix eyes. She gently waved her left hand, and a mighty palm wind slapped toward Zhang Wuxiang's face. Bam! Ah! Zhang Wuxiang flew out miserably. She staggered and crashed into a display case. Fortunately, the display case was very sturdy, and the crystal layer was quite thick. That was why she didn't break it. However, Zhang Wuxiang felt that her back was about to break. She cried out in pain as she clutched her waist. Wu Jin also hurried over, wanting to pull her up. Who would have thought that she would throw a tantrum on the ground and scream, "Mother, mother! Kill her! Kill that bitch for me!" The middle-aged woman's face turned green when she saw her daughter suffer such a huge loss. With a leap, he jumped down from the railing on the second floor and landed in the hall on the first floor. A few merchants who were selecting medicinal herbs at the side could not help but be startled by her sudden appearance. When they looked back, they saw an extremely vicious woman standing in the middle of the hall with a face full of resentment, glaring at the beautiful couple in front of her. "Do you want to die?" Emolien said coldly. While she was confronting the middle-aged woman, she did not forget to continue feeding the little fellow. "Junior, you sure talk big." The middle-aged woman's eyes flashed with a cold light as she said angrily, "You hurt my daughter, and you want to leave just like that. Madame Zhang, please stop." Wu Jin helped Zhang Wuxiang down the stairs and hastily advised, "This is Liangyuan medicine shop. It's not suitable for fighting." Zhang Wuxiang shrieked harshly, "Mother, kill that bitch, kill that bitch." The little stoic pulled Emolien's hand and took a bite of the radish pancake. She looked up at Zhang Wuxiang with a bored expression. She was simply a crazy woman. He didn't know which corner it had jumped out from. Chapter 21-28. How could people's hearts be so twisted? Everyone was here to buy things, so wasn't it good to be polite to each other? Did they have to show off their superiority and trample Jojo under their feet so that they could feel at ease? Madame Zhang felt that after her daughter suffered such a huge loss, she should teach the little stoic a lesson so that these young children wouldn't walk out with their heads held high and didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Wait. Liangyuan medicine shop's shopkeeper finally rushed over. He had just finished buying that batch of 3-leaf flowers and had his subordinates take inventory when he heard a shop assistant hastily report that someone was causing trouble in the front hall. When he rushed over to take a look, it turned out to be Madame Zhang of Great Source Island who was arguing with the honored customer who bought the 3-leaf flowers. The shopkeeper couldn't help but grumble inwardly. Great Source Island had always been on good terms with Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord. The people of Great Source Island had lived in Shuntian Prefecture for a long time, so from the madams to the young masters and misses, they were accustomed to being unreasonable. Now that Zhang Wuxiang was being taught a lesson by someone else, how could Madame Zhang take it lying down? This matter wasn't easy to mediate, and it might even bring disaster to the innocent bystanders. The shopkeeper hastily signaled the shop assistant next to him with his eyes and secretly instructed him to hurry out and ask for help. Meanwhile, he hastily stepped forward and stood in front of the little stoic and Zhang Wuxiang. He said to Madame Zhang with a fawning smile, "This old one didn't know Madame was coming. Please forgive me for not coming out to meet you." "Shopkeeper, this has nothing to do with you. Move aside." Madame Zhang's tone was very stiff and arrogant. "Ah, but..." The shopkeeper still stood in front of Arbor and shook his head with a fawning smile. "This young lady bought many things from my shop. She's our store's honored customer, so I can't let anything happen to our honored customer in the shop." "Bullshit." Zhang Wuxiang shrieked rudely and unreasonably, "What bullshit honored customer? Are you trying to coax a 3-year-old child? Didn't this little bitch just spend 1 spirit coin to buy a pot of lousy flowers?" "Shopkeeper Chiu, don't forget that our Great Source Island buys medicinal ingredients worth tens of thousands of spirit coins from your shop every year. Don't lose a watermelon for a sesame seed and offend our entire Great Source Island for a pauper. Don't lose more than you gain." "Shopkeeper Chiu." Zhang Wuxiang placed her hand on her waist and shouted with a haughty expression on her face. Mrs. Zhang also nodded. "That's right. Shopkeeper Chiu, you should consider what you should do." Shopkeeper Chiu was dumbfounded. "What spirit coin?" He thought for a moment and hurriedly said, "This little girl just ordered all the 3-leaf flowers here and spent 15,000 spirit coins." "What?" Mrs. Zhang, Zhang Wuxiang and Wu Jin were all stunned. They turned around and looked at Arbor in disbelief. "How is this possible?" Zhang Wuxiang immediately screamed, her expression completely unable to accept it. "I just saw her walk around the second floor 3 times and pick up a pot of rotten flowers. 15,000 spirit coins? Shopkeeper, who are you trying to fool?" Shopkeeper Chio's face was filled with confusion. What benefit would I get from lying to you? That's the truth. Shopkeeper, there's no need to talk nonsense with a retard. Come and pay the bill. Ah, good Mississippi. Shopkeeper Chio hastily plastered on a smile and walked toward Xiao Mu. Zhang Wuxiang's expression was completely distorted. She was in disbelief. How was this possible? Just now, she had asked the shopkeeper if he wanted to do business with Hongyuan Island, but now she was surprised. Chapter 21-29. In the end, a year's worth of orders from Hongyuan Island couldn't even compare to the girl's daily expenses. Wasn't this a slap to her face? She was completely trampling on her face, ruthlessly trampling on it like mud. Zhang Wuxiang was so angry that her entire body couldn't stop trembling. Her gaze was like a twisted viper as she stared at Arbor. She really wanted to transform into a python and swallow this bitch alive. Zhang Wuxiang only felt that she had never been so humiliated in front of others in her 32 years of life as a noble lady. Arbor's calm gaze made her deeply feel that she saw a trace of disdain in his eyes. It was as if that stoic face didn't care about Hongyuan Island at all. Zhang Wuxiang clenched her fists and her bones creaked. Madame Zhang's expression was also very awkward as she stared at Arbor, not knowing how to react. Arbor had already walked to the counter with shopkeeper Chio to settle the bill. After settling the bill of 15,000 spirit coins, the shopkeeper was also very embarrassed. His deceitful shop assistant even took a spirit coin from this esteemed guest for that pot of lousy flowers just now. It was really too deceitful. Hence, shopkeeper Chio took out several stalks of intermediate-level medicinal herbs as compensation for Xiao Mu, apologizing profusely. Arbor naturally didn't care. In fact, that Tian Xingzi really wasn't a trash herb. It was scary to be uncultured. Arbor looked at shopkeeper Chio with a strange gaze and reached out to put all the three-leaf flowers on the ground into his inner world. Then he nodded and said, "Okay, you don't have to send me off." "Mother," Zhang Wuxiang said angrily, "could it be that you're not willing to stand up for your daughter after seeing her suffer such a big loss?" At this moment, Madame Zhang was a bit hesitant. There weren't many rich people who could take out 15,000 spirit coins in one go in the Shantian prefecture. Madame Zhang didn't believe that this girl didn't have any background or status. However, it was a fact that her daughter suffered a loss. If she let the young couple leave like this, Madame Zhang would feel suffocated and couldn't swallow it. Wu Jin could not help but feel a headache coming on, and whispered to Zhang Wuxiang, "Wuxiang, don't make trouble anymore. Since this young lady can take out 15,000 spirit coins to buy such a large amount of medicinal herbs, she can't be an ordinary person. If this continues, it won't do us any good." Zhang Wuxiang clenched her teeth and shouted, "Brother Wu, don't tell me you really like that vixen?" Why was he speaking up for her again and again? So what if he had 15,000 spirit coins? It's not like our Zhang clan doesn't have that many spirit coins. What's there to be proud of? After saying that, she put one hand on her waist and said sternly, "If you have the ability, then buy all the medicinal herbs in the entire Liangyuan medicine store." A few merchants in the hall were huddled in the corner, pointing at Zhang Wuxiang and whispering among themselves. "This girl is too rude and unreasonable." "That's right. Why do you keep making things difficult for a little girl?" "He looks ordinary, but now that he's distorted, he looks even more terrifying." Zhang Wuxiang was furious. She turned her head and screamed, "What did you say? Why do you need to buy this Liangyuan medicine store? Giving all of them to my Chow Chow is also fine." A laughter came from afar into everyone's ears. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but be taken aback. They all looked in the direction of the door. Chapter 21-30. A handsome man in a purple robe entered the door. The moment he entered, he winked at Arbor and said with a grin, "Jojo." Arbor couldn't help but be startled. The person who suddenly entered was actually Ding Yun, young Master Ding. This business of his was really spread all over Shantian Prefecture. Emolian couldn't help but be amused by him. The cult master of the demonic sect is quite leisurely and refined. This business is quite diverse, from medicine to food, to underground fighting arenas. They really have everything you need. Well said, well said. Ding Yun deliberately angered Emolian. He tilted his head at him and cupped his hands smugly. "Jojo, my shop, inside and out, up and down. If you like anything, just take it away." Arbor was expressionless. The shopkeeper wiped his sweat at the side and bowed obsequiously. "Young master." Ding Yun opened a golden fan with a swish and waved it in his hand as he turned to look at the shopkeeper. "Shopkeeper Chio, what's going on? Someone informed me that someone is smashing things in the shop?" Shopkeeper Chiu hurriedly wiped his sweat again and nodded. This is just a misunderstanding. Don't worry, young master. It's fine now. Misunderstanding? Young Master Ding snorted. His gaze swept across Madame Zhang and her daughter's faces. He waved his fan and asked, were they the ones looking for trouble? Madame Zhang's face instantly turned the color of pig liver. What have I usually taught you? Although we're a small business and must be kind to make money, there's no need to be too polite to some unreasonable people. Just chase them out. The shopkeeper couldn't help but wipe his cold sweat. He nodded with an emaciated expression and glanced at his young master. He didn't know what was wrong with this young master today. He didn't believe that his young master didn't know the identities of Madame Zhang and Madame Zhang. He probably already investigated them on the way here. Alright, let's get rid of the irrelevant people. A cheap medicine shop like ours won't run out of business. Ding Yun waved his hand and said, there's no need to compromise with those who are looking for trouble. Madame Zhang was so angry that her nose twitched slightly. Zhang Wuxiang was also trembling all over. The handsome purple-clothed young master in front of them was naturally very good-looking, but the way he spoke and the way he looked at them with disdain was something that the mother and daughter of the Zhang clan could not accept. How dare you? Madame Zhang shouted. Her face turned red instantly. Zhang Wuxiang's entire body was trembling. She pointed at Ding Yun and shrieked, how can you chase a guest out? Your pharmacy, do you not plan to mingle in Shuntian Prefecture in the future? Ding Yun coldly glanced at the woman. Scram before I lose my temper. Zhang Wuxiang shrieked, and the jealousy in her heart surged forth. She pointed at the little stoic who was standing to the side nibbling on a radish pancake, and shrieked as if she had lost all reason, shameless thing. If it weren't for you, how could we possibly be chased out by someone? As soon as she finished speaking, Ding Yun swept Zhang Wuxiang with his sleeve, and she felt a powerful force press against her chest. She spat out a mouthful of blood with a pft, and was sent flying toward the shelf behind her. Hey! The shopkeeper was about to die from fright. He hurriedly threw out a rope to hold Zhang Wuxiang's body, preventing her from heavily crashing into the medicine cabinet behind her. Otherwise, the whole cabinet of medicinal herbs would probably suffer a calamity. Chapter 2131. Cough cough ah. Zhang Wuxiang reached out to touch the traces of blood on the side of her lips and shrieked, You actually dared to lay your hands on me. She was so angry that she was like a little white flower withering in the wind. She swayed and swayed, shaking so much that her eyeballs were about to fall to the ground. Arbor swallowed a mouthful of the radish pancake and looked at the girl with a blank expression. She didn't understand how she could be so magnanimous. She shook her head and said in a cold voice, being too angry is harmful to the body. It affects the spleen, stomach, and liver fire. It's really unwise. If you're sick, you still have to be treated as soon as possible. Otherwise, if it drags on for too long, there won't be any way to reverse the situation. Everyone. Emolian couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he raised his hand to rub his wifey's head. Why did it feel so funny? While others were half dead from anger, this little fellow started from medical knowledge and expressionlessly reminded others to pay attention to their health. Her explanation was really clear and logical. At least she could scare many laymen into a daze. Young Master Ding couldn't help but laugh out loud. He floated to Arbor's side and looked at her with a smile. Jojo, I'll give you all the medicinal herbs in the shop. The shopkeeper fell to the ground with a bang. Oh my, his young master. Is there anyone who squanders like you? With such a squandering method, no matter how much money you have, it won't be enough for you to squander. No need. Emolian held his wifey's left hand tightly. He lowered his other hand by half an inch and flipped his palm downwards. Immediately, a crisp ding-ding-dang-dang sound was heard. Pieces of spirit coins flowed from his fingers like a gurgling stream, sliding down endlessly. The ding-ding-dang-dang-dang sound lasted for about half an incense stick's time. At this time, the floor of the lobby was already covered with a thick layer of spirit coins. Everyone! Exclamation point. They stared at him dumbstruck for a long time, so long that they almost didn't know what to say. The coins were still flowing out endlessly, flowing over everyone's feet and gradually overflowing to their calves. Zhang Wuxiang, who was lying on the ground, was completely shocked by the Crown Prince's actions. She could only push the spirit coins away with all her might to prevent herself from being completely buried under the pile of spirit coins. Madame Zhang's expression was even more hilarious. She opened her mouth wide and stared blankly at Emolian, as if she wanted to see a flower in her face. Her gaze wandered up and down as if she was looking at a monster from another planet. Young Master Ding gloomily stared at Prince Imo in front of him. His gloominess turned to viciousness and then to anger. Enough. This damn man, was he trying to use money to kill him? Enough. Seeing that the Crown Prince had no intention of stopping, young Master Ding roared angrily, "It's already enough to pay for all the medicinal herbs." Everyone stared at Tycoon Lien with a dumbfounded expression. They never thought that they would be able to see such a marvelous scene in a shop in their lifetime. He spent a lot of money to buy all the medicinal herbs on both the upper and lower floors for his wife. Was he still human? Was this something a human could do? Everyone's minds were muddled, and their faces were also dazed. They kept feeling that if they let this young master continue being extravagant, their hearts would definitely not be able to take it. Arbor blinked and lowered his head to look at the spirit coins that flowed to his calves. She moved her small feet and kicked the spirit coins on her feet to the side. Chapter 2132. Xiao Mu looked up at her dear husband and asked in bewilderment, "Hubby, what are you doing?" "Give them all to Jojo," Emolien lowered her head and said to her. With a strange expression, Arbor looked at the spirit coins on the ground, then looked up at young Master Ding, whose face was green with dog poop. "I don't want them." Everyone. Oh my god. This couple was so willful. Not only did he spend such a large amount of spirit coins to buy all the medicinal herbs, but he also scared everyone present so much that they almost couldn't breathe. The other one was even more ruthless. She actually said she didn't want them. Why? Emolien raised her hand and patted the little fellow's head. "Don't you like medicinal herbs the most?" "There are too many, I can't put them all," Arbor quickly said. She had planted all kinds of medicinal herbs in her herb garden on Paradise Planet. Now that she had bought such a large batch of miscellaneous medicinal herbs, where should she put them? "It's okay, you can put them in the talisman. If you don't like them, you can throw them away." Prince Imo reached out and hugged her. Then he turned his head, his expression changing very skillfully. In the blink of an eye, the gentle young sir turned into the lofty Crown Prince Imo with a dark and gloomy face. "What are you spacing out for? Go get the medicinal herbs." "Ah, yes. The shopkeeper of the herb shop felt like he was going crazy. In his heart he was definitely cursing. Where did these two weirdos come from? The two masters were fighting. Couldn't they take into consideration the feelings of the commoners? Could they not be so fierce? Arbor could only sigh helplessly and said to the little water child in the depths of her conscience, "Dian, are all men so childish?" The little water child hurriedly said, Master, you're right. Men like to fight fiercely. They're not cute at all, are they?" Arbor nodded. She couldn't help but ask, "Do you think you'll take the form of a man or a woman after you transform? You'd better transform into a girl. It's less annoying." The little water child. "Master, I'm sorry to disappoint you." The little water baby ran away in tears. She didn't think too much about it when the water baby suddenly stopped talking. She just thought that the water baby had gone to do something else. Arbor kicked the spirit coins under his feet and followed shopkeeper Chio for a few steps. Then he sighed and said, "Don't bother, I'll take it myself." With so many medicinal ingredients, he could only store them in his storage talisman. His inner world simply couldn't hold them all. Furthermore, one storage talisman was not enough. 10 empty blue storage talismans floated out from Xiao Mu's side and swept towards the items inside the hall with a swish. The other 10 flew directly to the second floor. Not long after, shopkeeper Chio ran down the stairs with a strange expression on his face. He looked at the expressionless little stoic, then looked at his young master's dark face. "Cough, Miss Hey, you took away all the display cases and medicine cabinets. This crazy girl didn't even leave them a single strand of hair." At this moment, there was nothing but the 4 walls upstairs and downstairs. Even the candlesticks and vases in the corner were taken away by the young lady. Everyone. Why did they feel like the young lady was a swindler? If I didn't take them away, how could I store the medicinal ingredients? Could it be that I'm going to take them all in a mess? Arbor retorted angrily. Besides, can your cabinets and lamps be more expensive than the medicinal ingredients? I even bought the medicinal ingredients. Why can't I take something else? Chapter 2133. Everyone. Prince Imo turned his head and saw his wife's expression change instantly. He chuckled and praised his wife repeatedly. Right. If it's not enough, I'll just add more money. Everyone. They vaguely knew where this girl's temperament came from. No. The shopkeeper still wanted to argue for a few more words, but after being glared at by young Master Ding, he immediately fell silent and lowered his head. Boo-hoo, it was hard to be a shopkeeper these days. It was even harder to deal with such a willful young master. The mother and daughter of the Zhang family were completely silent now, and they didn't want to say anything. What should they say? They would be laughed at no matter what they said. Just now they were still mocking others for being poor and only taking a lousy herb worth 1 spirit coin. Miss Zhang even mocked others with a condescending expression, as if it was a crime for poor people to go shopping. But now, he had been slapped in the face so hard that he didn't want to be slapped. Wu Jini also felt extremely embarrassed. He glanced at Prince Imo, who had a spring breeze on his face, and then looked at young Master Ding, who had a gloomy expression and a face as black as the bottom of a pot. He cleared his throat and couldn't help but say, Madame Zhang Xiang, I think we should go back first. Zhang Wuxiang felt that she had lost so much face in front of others. At this time she was so embarrassed that she couldn't even raise her head. When she heard Wu Jini's voice, she simply couldn't vent her anger. Look at her stoic-faced husband. If he didn't make a move, she would have thought he was a pretty boy. Once he made a move, she knew he was a tycoon who doted on his wife. Then she compared him to this cowardly and mediocre fiancé beside her. There was no comparison at all. She angrily brushed away Wu Jini's hand. Go away. Xiang. Madame Zhang glared at Zhang Wuxiang warningly. Don't make trouble again. At this moment she could tell that Emo Lian's identity was definitely not ordinary. There weren't such outstanding young masters everywhere in the world, and it was even more impossible to randomly pick a tycoon who could give away tens of millions of spirit coins. Therefore, the most important thing now was to leave quickly so that they wouldn't be taken advantage of again. Mother. Zhang Wuxiang's heart was filled with unwillingness. She reached out and pounded the pile of spirit coins on the ground. The spirit coin bounced up and almost flew into her face. She was so angry that her ordinary face was completely distorted. She was ridiculed and humiliated like this, and at the same time she was beaten up like a dog by 2 men. Her mother and fiancé actually turned a blind eye to it and didn't help her at all. Especially her fiancé, he was simply a good-for-nothing donkey. Xiang, Madame Zhang rebuked angrily. Wu Jin hurriedly reached out to help Zhang Wuxiang up and whispered to her, these people are not ordinary people. Let's return to the residence first and investigate their identities before we make further plans. Zhang Wuxiang gritted her teeth and glared at Wu Jini hatefully. Suddenly, a dozen or so servants rushed in from the medicine shop's entrance. The sound of rolling iron wheelchairs followed. Why are you here? Zhang Wuxiang stared at the wheelchair that came in through the door, a trace of disgust in her eyes. Madame Zhang reached out and lightly patted Zhang Wuxiang's head. How can you talk to your second brother like that? Along with the wheelchair came a young man with a gloomy face. He pointed in Emolien's direction and said sternly, come arrest this man. Chapter 2134. Emolien faintly swept the 2 people at the door with impatience in her eyes. She lowered her head to glance at Arbor and said, it's those 2 damn dogs that your husband taught a lesson just now. How dare they come looking for trouble now? Why are you all still in a daze, you all? The gloomy-faced young man paused and abruptly widened his eyes at Arbor. He cried out involuntarily, why is it you? Xiao Mu looked at him blankly and sized them up from head to toe. He had no impression at all. Had he ever seen such an average-looking third-rate man? Who are you? Arbor asked loudly. Everyone. Why the heck did they feel that when the little stoic asked this question, the young man in the wheelchair's face was so contorted that it was about to crack? Bitch, you dare to do it but don't dare to admit it? Before the gloomy-faced young man could speak again, the young man in the wheelchair was the first to be unable to restrain himself from slapping the armrest and shrieking. Madame Zhang hastily walked toward the wheelchair and consoled, Dan, what happened? Don't get agitated. If there's anything, tell your mother. It's this bitch. It's her. She's the one who threw me into the water and fed me to the sharks, causing both my legs to be torn off by the sharks. When Madame Zhang heard this, she couldn't stop trembling all over. Her eyes were like a viper's as she stared sharply at Arbor. The venom in her eyes seemed to be about to flow out in substance. You're not mistaken? It's really this bitch? Madame Zhang asked harshly. Zhang Wudan hammered his thigh and cried involuntarily, Mother, it's her. Even if this little bitch turns into ashes, I won't forget her. It's her. She caused this child to be amputated from the knees down. I can't. Zhang Wudan looked like he found it hard to speak, and all the men present instantly understood. Fuck, this guy couldn't be so miserable that he fed his penis to the sharks after entering the water, right? That this was too tragic. Everyone looked at the little girl with the stoic face as if they were looking at a weirdo. The stoic woman still wore a perplexed expression. She raised her head to look at her husband, then at young Master Ding. Finally, she looked at Madame Zhang, who was gnashing her teeth in extreme resentment, and Zhang Wudan, whose expression was contorted beyond control. Who are you? Everyone was speechless. What could be worse than remembering someone in your heart, but that person didn't know you at all? Emolian almost laughed out loud. When his little miss was young, she wasn't even familiar with Duan Yu's celestial appearance. If it weren't for Duan Yu, that guy running around in front of her all the time, her face blindness would probably have flared up, and she wouldn't have recognized him at all. Speaking of which, even Yas, the handsome eagle of the grasslands, didn't recognize the little guy. Trying to make the little stoic remember this average-looking Zhang Wudan without any distinguishing features was truly a bit too much. If Qi Xianxian, Duanmu Qing, and the others weren't in closed-door cultivation, they would definitely die of laughter from the little stoic. Unexpectedly, the little stoic actually didn't even remember the events of the past few months that she had encountered this Zhang Wudan when she and her team were heading to Poland Prefecture on the ship. The man standing there with a gloomy expression was Shuntian Prefecture's chief manager's son, Tai Feng. The one sitting in the wheelchair was Great Source Island's second young master, Zhang Wudan. At that time, the little stoic and the others had ruthlessly taught them a lesson on the deck of the ship. Chapter 2135. The little stoic even ordered people to throw the two of them into the sea to feed the sharks. In the end, due to the ship's accident, they were transferred to Crimson Firmament Blue Wave ship, and the matter of these two people was left unsettled. At that time, the little stoic even muttered a few sentences, thinking that Zhang Wudan, who had lost her legs, had long been buried in the belly of a fish at the bottom of the sea. Unexpectedly, she was still alive and well. The Zhang family mother and daughter she encountered this time were Zhang Wudan's mother and younger sister. It had to be said that her ill-fated relationship with the Zhang family truly couldn't be severed. Unfortunately, the stoic already had no impression of Zhang Wudan. At this moment, Zhang Wudan was sitting in a wheelchair and staring intently at the little stoic. She couldn't stop trembling all over. You don't remember me?" Arbor shook his small head. Zhang Wudan shouted harshly, "I'm the person you threw off the ship. You vicious bitch ah." He watched as a cluster of purple flames rushed towards his face at lightning speed. Madame Zhang, who was standing in front of her son, calmly took out a mirror from her conscience. She abruptly enlarged it and placed it in front of the mother and son, blocking the attack of the purple flame. "Insolence!" Madame Zhang shrieked harshly. "Are you bullying our Great Source Island because there's no one left? You've been pressuring us time and time again. Do you want to become enemies with the entire Great Source Island?" Madame Zhang sneered and looked up at Emolian. "Young one, I advise you not to test Great Source Island's bottom line time and time again. I'm also advising you to have your son clean his mouth. If I hear him insult my wife again, I'll have him die." Emolian flicked his sleeve coldly as he stared at the middle-aged woman before him with an incomparably frigid expression. For some reason, the woman felt her entire body tremble, and a twisted light surfaced in her eyes. She abruptly dashed to grab Arbor's arm. "This bitch injured my son to this extent. I want her to stay by my Danner's side for the rest of her life and serve him well. This little bitch injured my son to this extent, so shouldn't she compensate him? My son's entire life was ruined by her, so she should use the rest of her life to compensate my son. Go to hell." Emolian's eyes hardened. She threw out a dragon-shaped purple flame, which rushed towards Madame Zhang's chest. What a shameless bitch. How dare he try to steal his wife? There was no need for this woman to exist anymore. He had to send her on her way today. However, Madame Zhang was not afraid at all. She took his attack head-on and was not injured at all. On the contrary, Tai Feng, who was standing beside Zhang Wudan, seemed to have been hit in the chest by a heavy blow. He howled as he flew out of the door and landed heavily on the ground, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Emolian and Xiaomu were taken aback at the same time. Madame Zhang took advantage of the moment when the two of them were stunned and placed her cold, snake-like fingers on Arbor's pulse. However, she didn't expect that it was as if she had landed her hand on a sturdy piece of jade. She didn't manage to seize Xiaomu's pulse at all, and instead Emolian, who had reacted swiftly, kicked her left leg. Abruptly, a slender dark moon appeared in his hand, and he ruthlessly pierced it through her heart. Tai Feng's blood-curdling scream came from outside the door. Emolien's expression froze. She heard young Master Ding's anxious voice. Could it be that this bitch used a substitute talisman? Be careful. Emolien was just about to carry his wife up and back away when just then, she felt her tentacles touch a barrier. The barrier completely separated the two of them. Chapter 2136. Madame Zhang looked at Arbor strangely and coldly said, "Little slut, let's see who can save you today." Saying this, she suddenly flipped her hand and placed a green seed in the palm of her hand. Arbor looked at the seed and for some reason, her eyebrows twitched. An indescribable sense of familiarity welled up in her heart. Madame Zhang used her spiritual energy to stimulate the seed, and the seed surged up at a terrifying speed. Countless green vines with barbs swung at Arbor. Arbor didn't know that a wood spirit master had such a unique skill. Stimulating a seed to attack unless the seed itself was strong enough, it was just a move that couldn't put out a nearby fire. Xiao Mu's expression chilled and she abruptly shifted backwards, dodging several green vines' attacks. The place she was trapped in was surrounded by walls on all sides. The area was very narrow and the green vine tentacles could wrap around her. Twice she was almost hooked by the barbs. Arbor coldly looked at the middle-aged woman standing in front of her with a sinister smile. "Although your substitution charm is quite strong, it's far from enough." Arbor sneered at her. Then, without another word, she directly summoned the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron in front of the woman and fiercely slammed it against the wall. Boom. Gagaga. Bang. The 4 walls couldn't withstand a single blow and instantly collapsed. The defensive artifact in front of Madame Zhang's chest also shattered into pieces, turning into fine powder that disappeared into the air. Oh. Madame Zhang screamed. On the other side, Emolien had already rushed over. Her handsome face was calm and dark moon flung at her face like lightning. Madame Zhang hurriedly used more spiritual energy to stimulate the seed. The seed extended countless branches and crazily swung in all directions, shattering a wall of Liang Yuan medicine shop. The branch pierced through the shop and entered the cloth shop next door. The shopkeeper screamed and fled with his customers into the street. At this time, most of the people in the pharmacy had also fled. They had fled far away but they stayed on the street out of curiosity. Many pairs of eyes looked towards Liang Yuan Pharmacy. Madame Zhang seemed to have gone completely crazy. The seed was embedded in her palm, and while it was constantly absorbing spiritual energy, it was more like it was absorbing her flesh and spirit meridians. Xiao Mu glanced at this crazy woman and said coldly, "Take this move of mine." As soon as he finished speaking, he threw out the small cauldron in his hand. It turned into a flowing light in midair and turned into a huge object, pressing down on Madame Zhang's head. Madame Zhang was so frightened that her liver and guts turned cold. She scrambled to the ground, rolled to the side and dodged the attack. Just as he collapsed to the ground, he felt the medicinal cauldron heavily smashing into the ground, crushing countless green vines. This pressure seemed to be pressing on her bones and blood, as if the left side of her body was completely crushed and fractured. Madame Zhang's sharp voice floated above the medicine shop. Zhang Wudan, who was sitting at the door, saw that the situation was not good. He hurriedly pushed his wheelchair to escape. However, there was a small threshold at the door. When he came in, it was naturally Tai Feng who pushed him in. When he went out, he was in a panic and couldn't escape immediately. Zhang Wudan used all his strength to push the wheelchair and helplessly looked at Zhang Wuxiang. Chapter 2137. Zhang Wuxiang was also scared out of her wits. She didn't even look at her second brother and immediately ran out of the shop. Wu Jini didn't have any feelings for Zhang Wudan. His biological sister didn't even want to save his second brother, so why should he waste his energy? Therefore he quickly followed Zhang Wuxiang out of the shop. He originally planned to run back to the Heavenly Fortune sect to get reinforcements, but he stopped halfway and thought to himself, those young men and women are so powerful. Even if I go back to get reinforcements now, I'll just be giving away my sect members' lives in vain. It'll be completely useless. Then he dismissed the idea and looked back at Zhang Wuxiang, who was standing at the entrance of the shop and trembling with fear. This girl was too proud and always thought that Great Source Island was invincible. She didn't expect that there were countless people with profound cultivation in the world. Not everyone would give face to Great Source Island. Zhang Wudan looked on in confusion as his sister and brother-in-law ran out of the shop, ignoring him. He opened his mouth to call out, but no sound came out. He was so scared that he almost peed his pants. He trembled and tried to push the wheelchair with all his strength, but the wheelchair refused to budge. In the end, it fell on the door sill and couldn't move up or down. Where do you think you're going? A cold voice came from the back of his head. Suddenly, Zhang Wudan was pulled out of the wheelchair by a circle of wood spirits. It was as if he was being pulled by an invisible force. He flew out of the wheelchair and fell heavily at Ding Yun's feet. Ah! Zhang Wudan turned pale with fright as he looked at the young master who was looking at him coldly with drooping eyebrows. Then he hurriedly turned his head to look at his mother, who was wrapped in green vines, and screamed, "Mother, mother, save me, save me!" Dan. Madame Zhang revealed her face from the green vines. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws and wanted to go forward, but she felt powerless. It was as if her body was completely out of her control. The seed was buried in her blood and bones, and it was firmly absorbing her blood, bones, and strength. Could it be that her soul would be stolen by this seed? When Madame Zhang thought of this, her body couldn't help but tremble slightly. "Mother, mother, save me. Mother, please save me." Oh. Zhang Wudan could feel that the wood spirit energy around her neck was getting tighter and tighter. Her snot, tears, and saliva flowed down together. He begged for mercy and looked pleadingly at Ding Yun, who had a cold expression on his face. He didn't want to die, he didn't want to die. If he had known earlier, he would not have provoked this demoness. Every time he provoked this demoness, he would always be in big trouble. The first time he lost his legs, this time he might lose his life. I regret it so much. Zhang Wudan wept bitterly and wished for nothing more than to kowtow to Ding Yun. "Let me go, all right? I won't dare to cause trouble for this young lady again." Ka-chow. Why did that crisp sound so familiar? Ah, it was the sound of his neck breaking. He was dead. His neck had been broken by the wood's spiritual energy. Dead. Madame Zhang, who was wrapped in vines, let out a bitter and hateful scream. The vines around her surged wildly, as if they wanted to inject endless vitality into the cauldron. Arbor frowned and picked up the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. Emolien leapt to Arbor's side and held her by the waist. She looked over with a frown. Chapter 2138. "Looks like this woman's soul has been stolen by that strange seed," Emolien said after a moment's thought. "Master, I can sense Qiuqiu's aura from that seed," Little Water Diandian suddenly said. Bang! A transparent water child squatted on Arbor's shoulder and glared at that strange vine. "You were right, Master." After coming out, the feeling became even stronger. "This is a fragment of a holy wood seed." Arbor! Exclamation point. "What do you mean?" Miss Chiao caught the word holy wood. "You mean that Qiuqiu really isn't an ordinary little tree but one of the 5 spirit origins, the holy wood?" The water child looked at Arbor in shock and asked in shock, "Master, you don't know?" Arbor's face was expressionless as he slapped the water child's head and retorted, "What do you think your master doesn't know? How can I not know?" In fact, she had only suspected it before, but today she was sure that Qiuqiu really was one of the 5 spirit origins, the holy wood. Then just now you. She looked extremely shocked. "What did I say just now?" Arbor snapped. "I didn't say anything." Emolien couldn't help but laugh. The little fellow's bad habit of being stubborn and refusing to admit his mistakes resurfaced again. Miss Chiao's current state of mind was naturally, "Damn. Qiuqiu, why didn't you tell me that it wasn't an ordinary piece of wood? It's the most powerful holy wood in the world?" "Ah, you did it on purpose, right?" Fortunately, Qiuqiu was in seclusion right now. Otherwise, Miss Chiao would probably drag him out and beat him up. "Master, you used to call it little tree, little tree, little tree. Could it be that you didn't think it was a holy wood at all?" It had to be said that the water child was telling the truth. But would his master really admit that he was uncultured just like that? Impossible. Arbor retorted exasperatedly, "Do you think I'm stupid?" Qiuqiu was blessed by the heavens and formed its own star domain. Naturally, it's extraordinary and completely different from ordinary wood. In the blink of an eye, he saw Ding Yun tossing Zhang Wudan's corpse aside and walking over. Arbor then shut up and never mentioned the sapling again. The water baby also disappeared from her shoulder. The two of them used their telegnosis abilities to talk to each other. "How do I subdue it?" "Did you just say that this is Qiuqiu's seed fragment? What does that mean?" "Master, you don't know?" the little water baby asked blankly. Qiuqiu was once seriously injured. At that time, it was on the verge of breaking apart. The entire tree had exploded. Although the main body survived, it should only be half a piece of dead wood at that time. Arbor's heart skipped a beat. It was as if the endless void flashed before his eyes. A piece of dead wood and a small white figure drifted together for many years. Tears welled up in her eyes. Master Silver, if we can absorb this seed fragment, then the little tree will definitely wake up tomorrow. What should we do? Arbor's spirit was lifted. Master Silver, jump in. The little water baby said solemnly. Jump into that circle wrapped in vines. That tree is causing trouble right now, but in essence it won't hurt you. Arbor clenched her small fists tightly. All right. Jojo, what are you doing? Emolien saw that she didn't speak for a long time and knew that she was communicating with the little water baby through her telegnosis. She didn't disturb them. Chapter 2139. But now, seeing her pause in her steps as if she was about to rush toward the vines, he subconsciously grabbed her small hand tightly. Lien, trust me. Arbor turned to look at him. Emolien's heart skipped a beat. He felt that her eyes were especially bright and dazzling at this moment, like a ball of fire that illuminated the entire shack. It made him feel that there was no way such a cute girl could exist in this world. All right. Emolien loosened his grip on the little girl's hands slightly. He naturally trusted her. When he saw her separated by the barrier just now, he didn't panic at all. Because he knew that she didn't need to hide under anyone's wings and be provided for like a quail. She was a little girl who could fly side by side with him. She would definitely be able to deal with all the dangers and difficulties. Letting go at the right time and allowing her to grow up quickly was the best way to protect and love her. Miss Chiao smiled at Prince Emo, her eyes extremely bright. Her stoic face suddenly revealed a smile that was as if ice and snow had melted and spring had returned to the earth. Prince Emo was instantly entranced by it. Young Master Ding, who was standing at the side, looked at them with an uncertain expression. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't jealous. There was always a special aura between these two, as if even a nail couldn't penetrate it. At the same time that it made people envious, they couldn't help secretly feeling jealous. Arbor quickly ran to Madame Zhang's side, who was wrapped in vines. Seeing this, Ding Yun's face darkened. He flashed to Emolien's side and couldn't help but angrily rebuke, "You're just going to watch her die like this? Wasn't that tree a bit strange?" Madame Zhang's cultivation wasn't low, but she was still taken in by the tree as a vessel. Now that her soul had been seized by the tree, her bones, blood, and strength had all turned into nourishment for the tree. Even so, Emolien was still willing to let the little girl come into close contact with the tree? Wasn't he worried or afraid? Emolien didn't really want to pay attention to him. He only glanced at him indifferently and said coldly, "My wife doesn't need an outsider like you to worry about her." Young Master Ding sneered. "Do you think I want to worry about it? If it weren't for..." Ding Yun lowered his eyes and bit his thin lips. "If you hadn't met Xiao Qiao before I did, I don't know whose turn it would be to say, 'My wife doesn't need outsiders to worry about her.'" Emolien seemed to have read his mind. She glared at him fiercely and said, "The so-called improper desire is to do everything you can to get something that doesn't belong to you. If you can't get what you want, it's quite painful. It's better to let go early." "It's easy for you to say." Ding Yun suddenly turned his head, and the anger in his enchanting eyes had faded at this moment. Only a faint calmness and faint provocation remained. "If it was you, what would you do? Will you obediently give in and live happily ever after?" Emolien's eyes hardened. "I don't need to answer such hypothetical questions." His Jojo could only belong to him. There were no assumptions. Ding Yun revealed a mocking smile. "To put it bluntly, it's because we're on different sides. That's why you said such heartless words." On the other hand, when Xiao Mu leaped into the green vine's encirclement, she was met with a shriveled skeleton's gaping, ugly mouth that was poking straight at her. If it were anyone else, they would naturally be scared to the point of screaming. 6 chapters first, for chapters at night as usual. Chapter 2140. However, Miss Chiao, who was familiar with medicine and had studied the human body's meridians, didn't feel anything. She only frowned in disgust and waved her hand to destroy the skeleton. It was really trying to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. She originally wanted to strengthen herself, but she ended up becoming food for the sapling's fragments. Tiske. She really didn't know what to say about this Madame Zhang. She was happy that things had turned out this way. Her second son was gone and her daughter had run away. In the future, her husband would marry another wife and her stepmother would enter the family. Zhang Wuxiang wouldn't have such a good life anymore. However, all of this had nothing to do with Arbor. At this moment, she was slowly pacing in the center of the tree's branches as if she was taking a leisurely stroll. She wasn't worried at all that the sapling seed clone would suck her into pieces. She raised her hand to touch the vine beside her. It was a familiar feeling, very familiar. No wonder when Madame Zhang took out the seed, the aura it emitted was so strong that it made her heart jump. It turned out that her Qiuqiu was here. Hey, big sister. Suddenly, a small voice came from the side. However, Miss Qiao, who was familiar with medicine and had studied the human body's meridians, didn't feel anything. She only frowned in disgust and waved her hand to destroy the skeleton. This Madame Zhang really tried to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. She originally wanted to strengthen herself, but she ended up becoming food for the sapling. Diske. She really didn't know what to say about this Madame Zhang. She was happy that things had turned out this way. Her second son was gone and her daughter had run away. In the future, her husband would marry another wife and her stepmother would enter the family. Zhang Wuxiang wouldn't have such a good life anymore. However, all of this had nothing to do with Arbor. At this moment, she was slowly pacing in the center of the tree's branches as if she was taking a leisurely stroll. She wasn't worried at all that the sapling seed clone would suck her into pieces. She raised her hand to touch the vine beside her. It was a familiar feeling, very familiar. No wonder when Madame Zhang took out the seed, the aura it emitted was so strong that it made her heart jump. It turned out that her Qiuqiu was here. Hey, big sister. Suddenly, a small voice came from the side. It was soft and weak, sounding a bit ethereal. Arbor suddenly turned around and chased after the source of the sound. She saw a little boy who was about 4 or 5 years old. He had red lips and white teeth and was very cute. He was squatting in the bushes and looking at her with a pair of pitiful watery eyes. Arbor's heart skipped a beat. He quickened his pace and walked towards him. She stopped 10 steps away from him and waved her hands at him. Come. The little boy didn't move. He just looked at her with an expectant and innocent gaze. Come here, sister. A green vine suddenly drilled out of Arbor's sleeve and coiled around the boy's waist with a whoosh. However, she heard the boy cry out in surprise. Like a cannonball, he crashed into her arms. Wah! The little boy fell into her arms with a plop and was about to struggle. However, he found that his 4 limbs were all entangled by the vines. He was like a small silkworm cocoon, completely unable to exert any strength as he was bound by the wooden vines. You want to play dirty with me, your sister, right? Arbor lightly flicked his head. Do you think you can play me? Oh. The little boy looked at him pitifully and subconsciously stretched out his 2 hands that were as white as fat radishes to cover his forehead. Chapter 2141. Qiuqiu. Arbor stroked his little head lovingly. What about you? Don't be naughty, okay? Do you know how uncomfortable I've been during this period of time? Hurry and wake up. The little boy suddenly trembled and curled up. His voice sounded especially fragile. You want me to disappear too? Disappear? Could it be that Qiuqiu's seed fragment had already developed a weak intelligence? This was a bit troublesome. Arbor frowned slightly and looked down at the child lying obediently in the crook of her arm. In the depths of his large eyes, there were traces of pitiful moisture. In addition, there was also a hint of distrust. Arbor put him down and squatted in front of him. She raised her hand and stroked his head. When you attacked me in the barrier just now, you didn't use your full strength, right? Previously, she was locked in the defensive barrier by Madame Zhang with a divine weapon. With Qiuqiu's ability, he could definitely hit her in one strike, even if he was just a seed fragment. It could be seen that in the depths of his heart, he was unwilling to hurt her at all. Although he retained a faint trace of intelligence, overall he was still a part of Qiuqiu's main body. Sister, if I return to my position, I will disappear. When the child spoke of his sadness, his tears fell. Arbor reached out and pulled his little head into her arms. She stroked him and said, How can that be? You and the main body are connected and are originally one. After you return to your position, you will just become him and he will become you. Moreover, we can play together. Arbor straightened his little head and looked at the child in front of her seriously. Otherwise, I can only find a hole to bury you and let you become a half-baked tree. The little tree blinked pitifully. What do you mean half-baked tree? You have lost the strength of your main body. Even if I plant you, after 300 to 500 years, thousands of years, you will only be in the form of a child. You understand, don't you? Tears welled up in the little boy's eyes. He curled himself into a ball and squatted on the ground. He said pitifully, Will it hurt to return to my position? Arbor rolled her eyes at the sky and lifted the child up. Remove the vines around here. Sister, can you remember my name? My name is Little too. Arbor. Could it be that Qiuqiu's seed fragment has more than one piece? Arbor muttered to herself. From his tone, Could it be that there is a third, fourth, and fifth? The boy sniffed. After I return to my position, sister? Xiao Mu sighed in amusement. You and Qiu are originally one, so sister naturally loves and misses you very much. The boy wiped his tears. In the future, if you meet little three and the others, if they don't return to their positions, will you kill them? Xiao Mu was startled and speechlessly shook her head. Of course not. Then what if I don't return to my position today? I said I will dig a hole and bury you. Arbor flicked him on the head. Do you think I am a homicidal maniac? I can hurt anyone, but I will never hurt the people I care about. Qiu, you are also one of the people I care about. The little boy's face instantly glowed with vigor and light. He threw himself into Arbor's arms and shouted, Sister! Arbor was almost knocked to the ground by him. Chapter 2142. Looking down, she saw that the child's body was emitting rays of lush green light, which slowly flowed into her body. That feeling was unusually warm and made her feel happy and encouraged. Arbor narrowed her eyes and subconsciously reached out to hug the child in her arms, until he dissipated into rays of white light and disappeared into her arms with a smile. When she opened her eyes, Arbor discovered that she had already escaped from the vines. A wisp of lustrous green with spiritual energy slid around her wrist, and her body seemed to be surging with endless power. Arbor's body swayed slightly, and Emolien hurriedly reached out to support her. Seclusion, seclusion. Arbor spat out these words with difficulty. At this moment, the little fellow felt that the spiritual energy in her body was surging, and she could barely form a proper sentence. Emolien immediately panicked and hurriedly reached out to pick her up, flying out of Shantian City. The urgent matter at hand was to find a quiet place for the little girl to cultivate in seclusion. Otherwise, if the spiritual energy rampaged in her body, it would easily affect her body. Ding Yun's gaze darkened as he watched the two fly away. He frowned and glanced at them, then turned to look at shopkeeper Qiu, who was standing solemnly beside him. Shopkeeper Qiu quivered and glanced at the bare walls of his shop. He said with a sullen face, Master, I'll go buy a new batch of goods now. That girl was too much of a scammer, emptying their shop in an instant. No need. Ding Yun waved his hand disapprovingly. We were going to move the shop in the first place. Sort out the accounts for the past few years, and I'll send someone to collect them in a few days. Shopkeeper Qiu was taken aback, then nodded repeatedly. Prepare to go to the divine continent with Ba Shan. Ah, but old madam. Ding Yun glanced at him indifferently. It's fine. If mother has thought it through, she'll go herself. We just have to take care of our own matters. Shopkeeper Qiu knew that the knot in the hearts of the mother and son was very heavy, so he didn't try to persuade them any further. He nodded and said, All right, young master. This old man will make some preparations in the next few days and go ahead first. Ding Yun nodded and didn't say anything further. He turned around and strode out of the door before looking up at the distant sky that was like jade water, and his gaze was gloomy and difficult to understand as he glanced deeply at it. Jojo, even if you don't remember anything, it doesn't matter. So. The guard only saw a black light flash past his eyes. When he rubbed his eyes and looked again, all he saw was a blue sky and white clouds. There was nothing there. Emolien carried Arbor and quickly came to the forest outside the city. He found a place with an open field of vision and placed her on the ground. He waved his hand and set up a defensive barrier. Arbor closed his eyes and sank into his star domain. His spiritual sense avatar turned into a speck of light. Just as it sank into his dantian, he saw that the sapling seemed to have been injected with a quickening agent. Branches were growing horizontally from the trunk, and green leaves were also growing densely. Arbor was very happy to see this. He stared at his Qiu without blinking. His spiritual sense avatar jumped under the tree and circled around it. He clasped his hands behind his back and looked up at the branches and leaves at the top of the tree. The sapling grew strong and healthy in an instant. This was officially entering the growth stage. Arbor was overjoyed. She felt the spiritual power in his body skyrocket, so he hurriedly closed his eyes and directed the spiritual power in his body to the spirit meridian without any distractions. For a moment, the wind and clouds surged and the weather changed abruptly. Chapter 2143. All the spiritual energy gathered above Arbor's head, forming a small whirlpool. Layer by layer, it absorbed all the surrounding spiritual energy into her body. The spirit division record had broken through to the 7th level, and her spiritual meridians had formed a 7th branch. Qiao Mu closed her eyes and looked inside herself. She gazed at the new tiny branch meridian that had appeared in her meridians. Spiritual energy trickled into this newly formed weak branch meridian. So, other than her main meridians, she had 7 more spirit meridians than others. What did this mean? In other words, Arbor's spiritual energy was 7 to 8 times more than others at the same level. The entire mountain forest exploded with a strong light. Mo Lien, who was standing beside her and watching her level up, couldn't help but sigh helplessly. With such a huge commotion, not to mention running out of the city, even if they ran deep into the mountains and forests, they would probably be discovered by many cultivators. Sigh, how monstrous was his Jojo? Mo Lien's eyes were smiling. He stood beside Arbor and watched his little wife attentively. In the mountain forest, a cool breeze blew through his robes. Little Seven's figure suddenly appeared beside Mo Lien. Don't let anyone near here. Yes, master. Yan Qi suddenly rose into the air and turned into a golden light. He suddenly turned into a dragon and flew above the two of them. With a roar, he flew towards the practitioners coming from all directions. Holy shit, a dragon. What's going on? This mountain forest is the main road to Shantian Prefecture. Why would a dragon appear out of nowhere? Seventh Yen roared and charged toward the cultivators who were running toward them on the official road. Those people were so scared that they threw away their helmets and armor. They hurriedly turned around and ran for their lives. Oh my god. Sacred beast, it's actually an ancient sacred dragon. Oh my god. Run quickly. Sacred beast, that was a powerful existence recorded in ancient books. Who had seen it with their own eyes? Ha ha ha, they were lucky enough to see it today. Seeing everyone running over in a sorry state from afar, the other cultivators who were rushing over naturally didn't dare to say anything more. They quickly followed the crowd and ran away. What a joke. If they had to pay with their lives just to watch the show, who would dare to do so? Everyone hurriedly fled in all directions. Another burst of intense light erupted from the mountain forest, and Xiao Mu's cultivation exploded from level 5 spiritual cultivator to level 6 spiritual cultivator that she could even see her spiritual sense avatar inside her dantian shaking its small hands and feet as if it were convulsing, dancing with joy. Sigh. He wasn't calm at all. How could he be as calm as her? If this spiritual sense body was released, wouldn't it be a funny existence in the eyes of others? It was too embarrassing for her. Mo Lien raised her head to take a look. The ground around her was slowly sinking due to the vibrations caused by the spiritual aura. The trees next to her were falling down one after another with creaking sounds. His wife's advancement this time was too fierce. Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. With a wave of her hand, a jade communication talisman appeared in her hand. Jichen, 10 li outside of the city, Jojo is advancing. Take some people and stop all the people who are rushing over here. Looking at the situation, it would take a few days for his little wife to advance. Prince Mo calmed himself down and found a stone stool to sit beside his wife. Separated by the transparent defensive barrier, his eyes were fixated on her body. What should she do? She had only just advanced in the spiritual realm and she had already caused such a big commotion. Chapter 2144. In the future, if she were to ascend to the immortal realm, she would have to go through the 5 spirits reincarnation trial. Who knew? If the heavenly Tao would be furious and kill this little demon in front of her. Mo Lien supported her chin with her hand and tilted her head slightly as she stared intently at the little girl. At this moment, it was as if the wind had stopped. Everything around them seemed to turn illusory, and time seemed to be frozen here. In his phoenix eyes, in his line of sight, there was only her. 7 days later. The little girl opened her slightly dazed eyes and jumped up. She immediately saw a handsome man outside the defensive barrier, his green robes fluttering in the wind and a slight smile on his lips. Lien. With a wave of his finger, Mo Lien removed the defensive boundary around her and teleported to her front. He stretched out his arms and pulled her tightly into his embrace. Sighing softly, he raised his palm to caress her a few times. My Jojo, your husband has missed you so much. The little girl moved her head in his water and extended a small fist. She clenched it and cheered, Lien, I feel like my entire body is filled with great power. TSK little fellow, you've ascended 3 levels in a single bound. Of course you're filled with great power now. Jichen sighed softly. The two of them looked back and saw Jichen, little Taisui, Dao Wuji and the others slowly walking over. Arbor hurriedly checked her cultivation, and her eyes immediately lit up. I've ascended. Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh. You've been in seclusion for 7 days. It's not as simple as ascending. Your spiritual sense has also grown quite a bit. Arbor looked again and nodded. I've become a 7th rank spirit master. My spiritual sense has also grown quite a bit. Most importantly, she had broken through to the 7th level of the soul chapter. Now she could cultivate her 7th branch meridian. At this moment, she felt that her body was filled with spiritual power and was very powerful. Emolian looked at her with a gentle gaze and nodded. This ascension went quite smoothly. Let's go back first. Arbor grunted and turned to look at Ji Chen and the others. Why is everyone here? How can we not come? You've caused such a big commotion and attracted many people to investigate. Fortunately, we acted in time and helped you block all those random people. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to live such a peaceful life these past 7 days. Arbor nodded in realization. Thank you for your help. Let's go back first. With a wave of his hand, he brought out several vigorous horses from Paradise Planet. He used it as a means of transportation. Everyone wanted to return to the city in a low-key manner so that they wouldn't attract too much attention while riding the dragon and phoenix. Who would have thought that this group of men and women would be eye-catching to begin with? As a result, when they entered the city, they attracted the attention of many young men and women. With the city gate completely blocked off, Emolien's party ultimately had no choice but to abandon their horses and scurry onto the roofs, fleeing in defeat by leaping onto eaves and vaulting over walls. When they returned to the inn, everyone saw that Hu Jinchen's sleeves had been pulled off by 2 young ladies who were like wolves and tigers. They couldn't help but point at him and laugh loudly. Miss Zhao was baffled. What were those people doing on the street just now? The corner of Emolien's mouth twitched secretly. As he spoke, he lifted his sleeve to wipe Emolien's cheek. That ant just now spoke so loudly and looked so agitated. Her saliva almost sprayed on your face. So dirty. Did you hear what she said clearly? Everyone, Chapter 2145. Jojo, you don't know why they're chasing us? Dao Wuji felt that there was a need to discuss this issue with his sister-in-law. He kept feeling that boss seemed to be very bitter about chasing his wife from afar. Arbor glanced askance at him and gazed at him with a, "Are you an idiot?" expression. How could I not know? They're chasing me because they want to rob me, of course. Everyone, Emolian couldn't help but facepalm. She suddenly recalled the incident with the 4th princess. It was the same trick with different people, but the little fellow always thought that they were chasing her for the sake of robbing her. That was why she beat up the 4th princess Emo Shuang back then. So shouldn't those passers-by thank themselves that they were actually weaklings that Jojo couldn't be bothered to lay a hand on them? Isn't it because we're beautiful? The peony fairy couldn't resist teasing. Arbor blinked and turned to look at Emolian. He asked with a frown, just like how Emo Shuang chased after eldest Qin back then? And like how a flock of orioles and swallows chased after Omega Kotoku? She recalled that when she first applied to enter the Qin estate, she also encountered a bunch of mentally abnormal people who chased after Omega Kotoku and screamed crazily. They were simply sick. This type of person is sick. Arbor said expressionlessly. According to the liver meridian, depression or sudden mental stimulation are abnormal emotional problems. The liver meridian will block meridian qi and ultimately the virus will invade the entire body. Everyone, Ha ha. Everyone laughed like idiots, but they still looked at Prince Emo sympathetically. Brother. You've worked hard. It wasn't easy chasing after the crown princess, right? That he must have accumulated several lifetimes worth of good fortune to be able to chase the stoic face home. The little stoic's train of thought was truly amazing. In her opinion, the reason why she chased after the beautiful men was because she was mentally stimulated, her liver was blocked, and she was in pain. Everyone laughed so hard that their teeth were visible. The little stoic was expressionless. She didn't know what was so funny. As a result, the group of people laughed and laughed, but when they saw the stoic face above them, they inexplicably couldn't continue laughing. Arbor glanced at Hu Jiechen and the others, then silently turned around and walked upstairs. Follow me. Everyone rubbed their noses speechlessly, nodded, and followed her to the 2nd floor. After entering the room, Arbor turned to Emolian and said, Husband. Emolian nodded knowingly. A layer of defensive enchantment fell down and covered the entire room. Little Tai Sui then flicked its finger to reinforce the defensive barrier on top of it. Hence, Xiaomu had the sapling drag everyone inside. As soon as they entered Paradise Planet, Arbor didn't have time to explain anything to everyone. Arbor's eyes lit up as he rushed towards a little Treyant. That's right, Qiuqiu had consumed the profound spirit jade for a long time and absorbed the entire spirit realm on the island. 7 days ago, It had fused with the seed fragment and finally awakened. Furthermore, it had entered the early stages of growth. The little tree ant also waved its branches and excitedly ran towards its master. The adorable little tree ant widened its round, bean-like eyes, and tears were about to flow out. It raised its arms and ran towards Arbor while shouting, "Master, master, I want a hug." Smack. A smack landed on the little trent's head. Chio tilted its head in bewilderment and looked at its little master. After not seeing him for so long, shouldn't master be hugging and kissing him? Chapter 2146. Why did this scene feel completely different from what he had imagined? Chio thought that master would definitely hug Chio happily after not seeing him for so long. Not to mention kissing him, but at least caressing him a little. What the hell was going on? Why was he beaten up by master? Oh. The little tree ant waved his branches and scurried away. Arbor chased after him for a few steps. "Don't run. Who told you to act on your own? Stop right there." Xiaomu leaped up and landed in front of the tree ant Chio, her small face looking at him in a huff. "Master." Chio called her weakly and subconsciously took 2 steps back. He said pitifully, "Chio is confident that I can recover on my own." "Confident my ass." Arbor glared at a certain tree and asked angrily, "Let me ask you, what were you thinking at that time? Did you think that by sacrificing a little, you could fulfill my wish? If something really happened to you, how could I live with peace of mind for the rest of my life? Do you want me to die of regret, anger, and resentment?" When Xiaomu recalled how she had helplessly watched this tree turn into withered branches and withered leaves in front of her back then, she was so angry that she could not vent her anger. She had really panicked then. This damn tree actually didn't tell her anything and directly acted on its own initiative. Chio had a stuttering expression on his face. His black bean-like eyes darted around, not daring to look at Arbor. After a long while, he finally admitted his mistake with an honest expression. He muttered to himself and said softly, "Master, Chio knows his mistake. Master, don't be angry." "Come here," Arbor roared at him. The little tree ant had the urge to run back, but in the end, he braced himself and moved to Arbor's side. Arbor looked at him helplessly, sighed and picked him up. Flicking a few tender leaves on his head, Arbor said softly, "Chio, don't be so impulsive in the future. If there's anything in the future, discuss it with me first. Don't act on your own." Chio naturally nodded his head 101,000 times. However, in the depths of his heart he was still very determined. If little Master is in danger, of course Chio will use all means to protect her. Psych, girls are so troublesome. He was at his wit's end now that she was crying to him. Arbor looked at the tree in his arms expressionlessly. "What are you thinking about?" His expression was strange. It didn't seem like he was thinking of anything good. Chio, who was in a fugue state, quickly regained his senses, his black eyes rolling around the tree trunk. He suddenly acted cute and changed the topic stiffly. Master Silver, do you know? Ever since our paradise planet was promoted to a spirit realm, the spirit realm has become a spirit realm. The production of spirit tea will double. I collect tea every half a month. I've already accumulated a lot of spirit tea. Master, do you want Chio to brew some tea? Master, would you like some tea? He forcefully changed the topic. Arbor looked down at him speechlessly, shook his head, and patted his tree head. Chio, I want you to promise me that you'll be good in the future. The little tree revealed a very touched expression and said, "Don't worry, Master, Chio will definitely be very good." Arbor touched his leaves and looked him up and down. "Have you entered the growth stage now?" Yes. Chapter 2147. Chio nodded furiously, a happy expression on its tree-like face. "Master Silver, isn't Chio very good? Chio has officially entered the early stage of growth." Arbor nodded and looked around. Before she had entered, she had already felt that Paradise Planet, Fish Orchid Planet, and Chuyun Planet had all expanded quite a bit. Now that she had entered Paradise Planet, it was indeed so. "Chio, let's go take a look at the 100 Herb Garden." Okay. Arbor waved at Emolien and the others. "I'll go pick some things in the herb garden first. You guys play for a while." Emolien nodded slightly, indicating that she understood. As for Dao Wuji and the others, they had already run off somewhere with curious expressions. I don't want to go out anymore. It'll be great to stay here and cultivate in seclusion," Peony Fairy said with a soft sigh as she flicked her slender fingernails seductively. "Big sister, little sister has the same intention," Ginkgo Fairy hurriedly said. When they had entered, they had felt a dense wave of spirit energy rush towards them. Thinking that Yang Shirong and the others had found a place with an extremely fast flow of time and excellent feng shui for cultivation, they had really hit the jackpot. Their realms would definitely soar during this period of time, right? Ginkgo Fairy also looked forward to it. There were many mundane matters outside, but they didn't have to care about anything here. How great would that be? The little fellow had already run back with a face full of excitement, holding a bunch of herbs in his hand. Hearing the sister's words, he hurriedly shook his head and said, "With your cultivation, I'm afraid there's not much use for you to cultivate here. At the very least, the spirit domain had to be promoted to the God realm. Only then would it be suitable for people above the spirit supreme realm like them to cultivate. It's fine. The main thing is that it's quiet." Ginkgo Fairy giggled, her gaze fixed on the herbs in her hand. "Finished picking?" Arbor nodded, then ran to Emolien's side and said happily, "My herb garden has more than doubled in size and there are more fields. I had Little Tree collect all the herbs I bought from Liangyuan medicine store." Qiuqiu was indeed a very hard-working child, helping her organize the medicinal herbs by category. Apart from the low-grade medicinal herbs that were not planted, there were many types of medicinal herbs from mid-grade to saint-grade medicinal herbs in the herb garden. However, there was also a lot of empty space. If they encountered any rare herbs in the future, they could continue to plant them. Just now, when she looked at the flourishing appearance of the entire medicinal garden, she was in a very happy mood. Seeing her happy expression, Emolien was also very happy. She raised her hand to hold her little hand and said with a smile, "Do you still want to go to the beach to take a look?" Arbor shook his head. "Let's not disturb Second Martial Ant and the others' cultivation. Let's go out." After everyone came out of Paradise Planet, they ate some food before returning to their rooms to rest. Emolien saw her take out the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron and knew that she was about to start concocting pills. She stood up and said, "Remember not to stay up too late." Arbor nodded and watched him leave. He tilted his head and was just about to start refining the spirit-gathering pill when the door to the room was pushed open. "Chow chow." Fairy Yellow Crane hurriedly stepped through the door. "Where did you go? Have you eaten?" Arbor had washed his hands clean and was about to start when he saw Yellow Crane Fairy come in. He could not help but ask curiously. "I went to the streets to ask around and ate a little," Yellow Crane Fairy said dejectedly. "I didn't expect everything to go smoothly in the main residence. It's as if nothing happened at all." Chapter 2148. Chasing her own disciple through the night and killing 2 maidservants. Such a big matter, yet there was not the slightest bit of news. Fairy Yellow Crane said dejectedly, "She's really amazing, smoothing out everything." Hearing this, Arbor couldn't help but raise her hand to pat her head. "Yellow Crane, don't be discouraged." After a pause, she looked at her seriously and asked, "But your master, she's doomed to self-destruction for doing evil. If there comes a day when I want to find trouble with her." Fairy Yellow Crane drooped her head and sighed softly. "I know." Arbor walked in front of her and pulled her to sit down. "There's something you probably don't know yet. The reason why there are corpse puppets running rampant in the world is not a coincidence, but someone deliberately did it. The organization behind all this is called Heavenly Fate. The brainless people in the organization may be spread all over the world." Arbor held Yellow Crane's hand and said, "What we can confirm now is, your master, Fengshe, and Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord, Gung Pengcheng, are all members of Heavenly Fate. However, the current Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord, Gung Pengcheng, has already been replaced by our people." Yellow Crane listened silently and suddenly widened her eyes. "Prefecture Lord Gung? He's one of you." The little fellow nodded her little head proudly. "There's no longer any Prefecture Lord Gung in the world. That old fellow." Thinking about how that dog still wanted to trick her even in death and refused to reveal the name of the mastermind behind the Mu family, Arbor couldn't help but frown slightly. "Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord is one of us now. His name is Dunji." Arbor said, "I'll inform you that if you see this Prefecture Lord's strange actions in the future, you don't have to make a fuss." Fairy Yellow Crane silently closed her gaping mouth, feeling that this matter was rather miraculous. Jojo and the others were really resourceful people. They could even deal with Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord. Then does my master know?" "She doesn't know." Arbor shook her head, then pondered for a moment and said, "Actually, I can't be sure. Maybe your master is a clever person and has already seen through all of this. It's not impossible." Huang He nodded and said indifferently, Yes, she is indeed intelligent. Then he smiled bitterly. Even my disciple doesn't know what she's thinking in the depths of her heart. How could she be so ruthless as to turn her own disciple into a strange corpse puppet? Huang He, maybe she wants to make you stronger so that she can use you? Fairy Yellow Crane was stunned for a moment before nodding. That was indeed what she said back then. She even said that senior sister was useless. However, she had single-handedly controlled senior sister Ling Fei and turned her into a monster. How could she blame senior sister Ling Fei for being useless? What kind of logic is this? Arbor sneered. The Heavenly Fate cult has always been dedicated to researching drugs that can change the human body. In the beginning, this medicine only worked on corpses. Now, it can even work on living bodies. This shows that it has improved a lot. Fairy Yellow Crane's body trembled slightly. I still don't quite understand. It's simple. This improved medicine is spread by the nightcaw birds. Once the human body touches it, it will automatically enter your bones and blood. From the beginning of the mutation of corpses to the current mutation of living bodies, it's all for one purpose, to give birth to powerhouses with special abilities. Succeed or die trying. Arbor's grip on Huang He's hand tightened slightly. Chapter 2149. This kind of medicine can make the human body stronger. Once it's eliminated, it'll turn into a monster that's neither human nor ghost. Madame Feng's words kept echoing in Fairy Yellow He's ears. Only now did she come to a realization. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Diaz? This is a 50-50 chance? How can there be a 50-50 chance of success? Look at how many zombies there are in the world. How many special ability users can there be? So, the chance is actually only 1 in 10. Fairy Yellow He asked in shock and anger. 1 in 10, I'm afraid that's overestimating it. Arbor sighed. He understood why Fairy Yellow He was so angry. Her master, who was so close to her, was sending her disciple to her death for this 1 in 10 chance. This kind of feeling was very terrible. Fairy Yellow He silently lowered her head and laughed bitterly. Sure enough, if you're not ruthless, you can't achieve great things. Arbor held her hand. Everything is in the past. But what I want to tell you is that Tianyun and I can't coexist. So one day we'll definitely go to war with your master. And that day was probably coming soon. Fairy Yellow He raised her head and looked at her with a determined gaze. Madame Feng is no longer my master. That night, she cut off our master-disciple relationship with her own hands. How can I still acknowledge someone who wants to kill me as my master? Fairy Yellow He said softly. I can't do it. Don't worry, Jojo. I won't be a burden to our team. When it comes to my firm stance, I won't miss a single point. Arbor pursed his lips and nodded. He patted Fairy Yellow He's shoulder lightly and said in a relaxed tone, I'm going to refine the spirit-gathering pill. Do you want to watch from the side? Yes. When she was downstairs, she had heard Fairy Ginkgo mention that Xiao Xiao was refining pills upstairs. That was why she had hurriedly rushed up. She couldn't miss such a good opportunity to watch him refine pills. Jojo, you can refine black-level pills now? Arbor nodded. Yes, I can occasionally refine a few earth-level pills. But it's not very stable. Wow. Fairy Yellow Crane had an expression of worship on her face. She hurriedly stood up, walked to her side, and circled around the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. I am now a black-grade alchemist. Jojo, what about you? Since you can refine earth-grade medicinal pills, then you must be an earth-grade alchemist. I don't know. Arbor said with a confused face. I can only refine a few earth-level pills from time to time. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. They can only be considered as profound-level pills. Huang He stopped in his tracks, blinking as he stared at her and asked, Could it be that you've never gone to the pill house to appraise your alchemist rank? Arbor shook his head in confusion. Do I need to appraise it? Huang He's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as he stammered, Of course we have to appraise it. If you don't appraise it, how would the world know that Shuntian Prefecture has another earth-grade alchemist? After the appraisal, even if I go to the upper 3 prefectures in the future, I can get a 50% discount when I go to the pill house to buy medicinal herbs. Why didn't you say so earlier? Arbor patted his chest with a pained expression. Previously, I went to the medicine shop on the street to buy a lot of medicinal herbs. Lotus flowers cost tens of millions of spirit coins. Huang He. When we alchemists go to the pill house to buy things, the higher the rank of the alchemist, the greater the discount. You didn't know? Chapter 2150. How could I possibly know? Huang He, you're blaming me for being uncultured? But now I know. Arbor reached out and took a medicinal herb, grinding it in his hands. But I've already spent an astronomical price to buy a bunch of medicinal herbs. Huang He could not help but laugh. It's fine, Prince Mo has money. Even if he had money, this was not how he should spend it. Thinking that if he went to the pill house to buy the herbs, the price would be reduced by half, Jojo felt like his heart was bleeding. The two refined in the room for an entire afternoon. Huang He was naturally in awe of Qiao Mu's pill refining speed. This little guy could actually refine several cauldrons of spirit-gathering pills in one afternoon, and even refined quite a lot of spirit-returning medicinal liquid. After seeing Jojo's refining speed, he was definitely going to be devastated. Huang He was very depressed and did not recover for a long time. It was all because Qiao Nan was too fierce. The two came out of the room at 10 in the evening. Huang He held a small box in her hand, immersed in the scene of refining pills just now, unable to pull herself out. While eating, she was somewhat absent-minded. Seeing her intoxicated look, everyone could not be bothered to disturb her. They saw her stuffing food into her mouth from time to time, looking like she was in a daze. Arbor could not help but feel a little helpless. He raised his hand and patted Huang He's shoulder. Eat properly. She was almost swallowing the spoon. Fairy Huang He was in a daze for a while, and was awakened by Arbor's pat. She came back to her senses and looked at everyone. Only then did she realize that she was sitting in front of a dining table made up of two long tables. Fairy Huang He revealed a strange expression. Eat already? Everyone was speechless for a moment. Fairy Ginkgo giggles, you're so silly. Eat properly, don't think about refining pills. Huang He's face was full of yearning. I learned a lot from Jojo's refining process today. I have to quickly finish eating and return to my room to meditate. As she spoke, Huang He had already quickly pulled out the rice in her bowl. Everyone. Jojo, how do you feel after advancing? Right. Fairy Yellow Crane turned to look at her. I forgot to ask you. I heard from Sister Ginkgo that you actually spent 7 days advancing outside Shantian City. She looked her up and down. I can't tell what realm you're in. Are you a level 5 spiritual master now? Huang He, let me tell you some shocking news. He Qin unhurriedly opened the fan in his hand and said with a smile, our Jojo has been promoted to a level 7 soul master. Huang He's mouthful of rice was all sprayed on the transparent barrier that had suddenly erected in front of her. Everyone was speechless. Don't you think this venerable peach blossom immortal is so mean? He knew that it would agitate the little girl, yet he still told her. At the same time, he had already set up a barrier in front of Huang He, allowing her to spout whatever she wanted. The peony fairy laughed so hard that she held her belly. Oh, don't make me laugh to death. You can inherit my fields. Huang He hurriedly wiped his mouth and looked at Arbor in disbelief. You actually leaped to the 7th rank all of a sudden? Such a ferocious advancement speed made people feel very scared. Arbor couldn't help but look helpless. Occasionally. Hearing that, Huang He breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. If you constantly advance like this, wouldn't you be ascending to the heavens? Everyone couldn't help but laugh, looking at Little Yellow Crane with a strange expression. Little Yellow Crane was really an honest person. Chapter 2151. She would definitely know in the future that Jojo's occasionally, today was full of mysteries. Alright, hurry up and eat. Rest early after eating. Arbor held up her bowl and called out to everyone. She had been in seclusion for a few days, so she needed a good rest. Nightfall. Arbor turned over on the bed and subconsciously reached out to hug Emolien who was lying beside her. But when she hugged nothing, she woke up with a start. Blinking her large eyes in the dark, Miss Qiao wrinkled her small nose and rubbed her eyes. She pulled the corner of the blanket and sat up. The room was very quiet. Where did that guy Emolien go in the middle of the night? He left his wife behind and ran off by himself. Miss Qiao wrinkled her small face in displeasure and jumped off the bed barefoot. Her expression was somewhat dazed as she looked at the pitch-black night. Dong. A small pebble wrapped in a small piece of paper was suddenly thrown in from the window and rolled to Arbor's side. Arbor squatted down to pick it up. There were only 2 lines of small characters written on it, and only a few words, "Follow me. Yi Lingmin." Arbor slightly raised her eyebrows. Yi Lingmin, this girl, still dared to come in front of her to make her presence known? Thinking of this, she put on an emerald green outer garment, tidied up her clothes and casually tied her hair into a loose bun. With a whoosh she shot out of the window. At the same time, Emolian was standing outside Shantian City. Her handsome face was cold as she stared at 3 or 4 black-clothed men kneeling in front of her with one knee on the ground. Your Highness, His Majesty has already issued 7 secret orders. He has ordered people from the forest guard to come and bring your Highness back. Tong's expression was somewhat fearful as he spoke. This subordinate doesn't know what to do. The forest guard Captain Fang Su is an extremely old-fashioned person. He takes His Majesty's orders as his priority. Once he receives the order, he will definitely spare no effort to capture your Highness. Emolian was silent as she stared at him. What's the hurry? Once this matter is over, I will naturally leave. Then how should I reply to Captain Fang? Just tell him that it will take at most half a month. Emolian paused for a moment. About 20 days. Don't worry, I will go back. He still had to go back and cause trouble for the great emperor of the divine land. The old man nagged him every day, asking him to go back, go back, go back. Then he would let him have his way. Tong inexplicably shook his small body. He felt that the crown prince's gaze was very strange. What should he do? It was as if she wasn't going back to spend time with the great emperor. Instead, she was going there to cause trouble. That's enough. Emolian waved her hand. You guys go and stabilize the Greenwood guards. As for the future, I will deal with it myself. Yes, Your Highness. They received the order and quickly disappeared into the night. Emolian looked up at the pitch-black night sky and harumphed lightly. Old man, I wonder if you're prepared for bad luck? Emolian turned and left, leaving only a wisp of cool breeze scattered under the stars in the dark night. When he returned to the inside room and walked into the room, he was slightly startled. He hurried to the bedside to take a look, and his handsome face immediately changed. His wife was missing? Dong dong bang, bang. Hu Shurchen opened his sleepy eyes in a daze. Before he could speak, he felt his collar being pulled up. Where's Jojo? Hu Shurchen. What's wrong with you? You're sleeping in the middle of the night and asking me for my wife. You didn't steal her? Steal your sister. Hu Shurchen looked at him speechlessly. Chapter 2152. He forcefully pushed his 5 fingers away and smoothed out the creases on his clothes. Big brother, shouldn't you be looking for where your wife went missing now? When I left, Jojo was still sleeping very soundly. He-chin was speechless. Can't she sleep until the middle of the night? Suddenly wake up? Emolian frowned. Where could she have gone? Yuan Shurchen rolled her eyes and slowly took out a green vine from her sleeve. Sapling, where did your master go? The little tree did not respond. He-chin waved at Emolian, who looked upset. Give me some fire, come. Whoosh. A purple flame lit up between Emolien's fingers. Just as he got close to the vine, he heard Chiochio squeak. Take it away, take it away. Annoying. Stinky fire. He-chin reached out to touch the little tree's vine. Are you willing to tell me now? You're extorting a confession. Chiochio said angrily. I won't tell you even if I die. I won't hesitate to go through a mountain of swords or a sea of fire for my master. It's just a little fire, it won't scare me. Wah wah wah. Take it away, take it away. So annoying, isn't that holy fire? It hated holy lightning the most in its life, followed by holy fire. Annoying, annoying, annoying. What if it burns my beautiful skin? Master, sob sob sob. These 2 men are forcing me. Sob 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 sob. I'll tell master. Chiochio cried pitifully. You're bullying me when master isn't here. He-chin smiled very gently. Chiochio, are you going to tell me now? Sob sob sob. I won't submit to force. Chiochio wasn't born to be afraid of death. It's so itchy, don't burn Chiochio. A vine twisted in He-chen's hand and said, You stop. Annoying. Master has been lured away by Yi Lingmin. Emolian's expression immediately turned ugly. She flicked the vine with her finger. Where did you go? Chiochio was being so secretive and unwilling to say anything. He felt that there was something fishy going on. Strange. Ming-chin chuckled and opened her fan. She blinked and said, I advise you to be honest. Otherwise, I'll throw you into the manure pit later. Chiochio immediately wilted. When these 2 unscrupulous people got together, they could think of anything. Master Silver went to the spring house. What? The 2 men yelled at him. What kind of lousy name was that? It didn't sound like a good place at all. Chiochio didn't dare to make a sound after being yelled at. It silently lit a candle for its little master in its heart. Let's just say that running around with Yi Lingmin in the middle of the night instead of sleeping was really an unwise move. She went in now. Qiuqiu had only pretended to be dead for a short while when Emolien picked it up and gave it a light swing. You can choose. Tell me now or I'll roast you first. Woo woo woo. Master Silver, Master Silver? This man's terrifying true colors had been exposed. Seeing that Prince Emo was about to act impatiently, Qiuqiu hurriedly said, She's at the door. She's at the door. Crown Prince, if you don't hurry over now, who knows? Wow. This spring house is so bustling. There are so many pretty boys inside. TSK. Wow, the male Silver at the door welcoming our little Master Silver is so beautiful. Prince Emo! Exclamation point. Hichin. Chapter 2153. Shut up. Emolien gripped the vine tightly. Wah, don't break me. This is a vine clone that I painstakingly cultivated. Whoosh. Prince Emo threw away the noisy vine and went out the window. The corners of Ma Shurchin's mouth twitched. She reached out to take the vine and caressed it. Qiuqiu, if you dare to leak the news, haha. Qiuqiu felt a chill run down his spine. Master Ma Shurchin, I'm already asleep. Good night. Qiuqiu greeted the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal obediently and then fell silent. The latter found it funny. Seeing that Qiuqiu was tactful, he didn't continue. He hurriedly opened the door and left quickly with Emolien. Arbor didn't know that Emolien and Ma Shurchin had already found out about her escape in the middle of the night. Along the way, she followed Yi Lingmin's graceful back view and chased after her. She turned a corner and chased into a bustling street filled with the fragrance of cosmetics. Xiaomu also did not expect that while she was chasing after them, red lanterns were hung high on this street, and there were many young ladies and young men standing at the entrance. It looked like business was very good. Arbor didn't chase after Yi Lingmin with all her might. Seeing that she seemed to have lured her here, she couldn't help but feel curious. She thought of what Yi Lingmin had said earlier. Whoosh! Yi Lingmin's shadow suddenly jumped onto a wall and disappeared behind the tall brothel. Xiaomu trotted up the steps and chased after him for a few steps before suddenly stopping. They saw a man in a white robe with a delicate and pretty face. He was like a noble young master that was free from dust under the snow. He was talking cheerfully and wittily, and he was smiling with his eyes narrowed as he invited a few covetous men to enter and have some fun. Arbor was expressionless. A young lady is here. The men at the entrance were all dressed to the nines. That's right, it's just plain flowers of all colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and purple. Xiaomu didn't look sideways as she trotted to the white-robed man's side. She peeked at him before walking inside without saying a word. A fiery red feather fan suddenly blocked Arbor's path. The first thing that entered his eyes was a fair and tender left leg. She was wearing a fiery red short jacket, which revealed her white leg in a very fashionable fashion. What a strange outfit. Seriously. It stung the eyes. Arbor! Exclamation point. Aya, little girl, do your parents know that you've come to our spring house for a stroll? Arbor glanced at the man in red. His taste in clothes was so much worse than rotten peach blossoms. Her looks were not bad, but it was a pity that she was painted like a flirtatious slut. She felt dizzy just looking at him. Everyone didn't know that in the little stoic's eyes, this row of red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, and purple had automatically been replaced with green peacock, scarlet chicken, yellow lantern grass, blue phoenix flower, and other exotic medicinal herbs and beasts that she automatically filtered out these men out of habit. Tap tap tap. She bypassed the man in red and continued to stride inside. Everyone couldn't help but be astonished. The man in blue hastily blocked her path again. Little girl, we're asking you a question. Did you come with an adult? We're operating a legitimate business. If you come out to play without an adult's knowledge, don't let someone come and smash our brothel. So long-winded. Jojo reprimanded in displeasure. Chapter 2154. A plump landlord walked over from the side and cast a sidelong glance at the little girl. He stuck out his big belly and laughed heartily. You haven't even grown all your hair yet? Yet you dare to seek pleasure. Haha, nothing is too strange these days. After saying that, he took out a handful of spirit coins, about 20 to 30 of them, and tossed them to the white-robed man beside him. He looked at the green-robed man lecherously and said, Green, let's go. Aya, landlord, who, you're joking again, aren't you? I'm one of the spring house's 10 great handsome men. After saying the first half of his words, the green-robed man's handsome face darkened, and he snorted. Those 20 to 30 spirit coins aren't even enough to treat me to a cup of tea. Slut. The landlord was humiliated, and he angrily stormed inside with a flick of his sleeves. What a joke, he had spent 20 to 30 spirit coins. At the very least he could find a slightly low-end handsome man to touch. Arbor looked at the landlord who walked in, then looked at the smiling white-robed man beside him. He suddenly raised his hand, took out a large bag of spirit coins from his pocket, and directly stuffed it into the white-robed man's hand. Wow! That green-robed man immediately surrounded him, wanting to inspect the bag of spirit coins. The white-robed man pressed down on his hand and said softly with a chuckle, "Xiao Lu, don't be rude." Then he turned to Arbor and said, "Miss, please come inside." As expected, one had to pay to enter. The little stoic nodded pensively and walked towards the House of Spring. Bah, a young lady actually doesn't learn the good things and imitates those trashy people to whore men. When Xiao Mu heard the sound, she turned around and saw a red-painted and green-painted old procuress standing in front of her red apricot house. She was currently in front of her red apricot house, snacking on melon seeds as she started cursing. Arbor was baffled. He didn't feel like paying attention to this old fellow and stepped into the spring house. At this time, two plain-clothed men were performing a dance on a stage on the first floor of the house. A crowd of idiots surrounded the stage and repeatedly cheered. From time to time, someone would toss spirit coins onto the stage. Xiao Mu instantly creased her brows. Those people had completely blocked the road ahead. She still had to go to the second floor to take a look. "Little girl, would you like to order a green sign later?" The green-clothed man changed his previous attitude of disdain and ridicule towards the landlord and followed Arbor like a little bird. Scram. Don't pretend to be pitiful. The man in blue hurriedly pushed him away and said to Arbor with a smile, point at me, point at me. I'm called Lan Ning." Arbor looked at them expressionlessly. At this moment, the dance on the stage stopped, eliciting cheers and thunderous applause from the audience. Someone shouted, "Wow, young Master Song Feng is here." Everyone quickly turned around and looked at the 8 handsome men beside Arbor in a daze. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and white. Arbor stepped forward. From time to time, a group of handsome young men's cries of surprise could be heard. "Such a young female guest came to our house. She seems to have facial paralysis. She doesn't have any expression. Wow, she was escorted in by young Master Song Feng and the 7 handsome men. I wonder what her background is. She looks so delicate. Turn around." A woman with a square face angrily turned her male companion's face back. "What are you looking at? What's there to see?" Chapter 2155. Of course the little girl was pretty. As soon as she entered the room, she attracted the attention of many people. Arbor didn't pay attention to other people's expressions. She glanced around the hall and suddenly saw Yi Lingmin's figure in front of the railing on the second floor. Halt! Xiao Mu was enraged. She gave up a good sleep and walked around with this woman for a long time. She still didn't know what she wanted to do. Arbor flew forward and frowned when she saw a group of people blocking the way. She lowered her head and rummaged through her pocket. She took out a large handful of spirit coins and threw them all at the corner. As a result, the scene immediately became chaotic. Everyone cried out in alarm and rushed toward the spirit coins on the ground. A path was cleared in front of her. Arbor's figure flashed and went to the second floor. She kicked open a door without saying anything. Fuck, it stung her eyes. When she kicked open the door, she saw a woman in a red tutu standing in the room and turning around with a small leather whip. The woman was petrified when she saw her. Arbor was also petrified when she saw the woman. There was a pitiful little beautiful man crying in the corner of the bed. He was looking at her with pitiful eyes like a puppy begging for pity. That white-robed man, the young Sir Song Feng that everyone spoke of as peerlessly handsome, hastily walked up. His mouth twitched inwardly as he dragged Xiao Mu out and closed the door behind him. "Fan Meng, Fan Yu, accompany this little girl to sit in the wing room." "Yes, young master." Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue and purple walked out. They were very good-looking, but Jojo couldn't remember them. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue and purple stared at the 2 men with jealousy. Green Peacock shouted angrily, "Young master, I don't agree. Every time there's a good thing you always entrust it to Fan Meng and Fan Yu. Are they raised by a mother and we are born by a concubine?" Young Master Song Feng glanced at him and said, "Little Green, you talk too much." Green Peacock stopped talking. He suppressed the anger in his heart and glared at Fan Meng and Fan Yu. Arbor frowned. He wanted to refuse. Why would he enter a room and sit down? But now that he thought about it, he wondered if these people knew Yi Lingmin. That fellow must have lured her here for a reason. As soon as they entered the room, Fan Meng and Fan Yu washed their hands and burned incense. One of them boiled some fragrant tea for her, while the other took a zither and sat down. Arbor waved his hand. Don't bother. All of you sit down. Don't do anything. The two of them looked at each other and obediently sat down in front of the little stoic. Let me ask you two, have you heard of Yi Lingmin's name? The two of them looked confused and shook their heads at the same time. Arbor frowned and asked, You've never heard of it? Miss, this Miss Yi Lingmin you're looking for, could she be one of our guests? But the guests usually don't reveal their names to us. Arbor glanced at the two of them. Fan Meng hurriedly said, Miss, do you want to drink wine or tea? No need. It was the middle of the night and they were drinking tea. Did they still want to go home and sleep? Senseless. Could it be that Yi Lingmin had nothing better to do and was toying with her? Arbor stood up in a huff. Go home. Miss, wait. Fan Yu stood up in a panic and hastily ran to block the door. He looked at her pleadingly. Miss, could you please wait for 5 minutes before leaving? Chapter 2156. If Miss leaves now, I, Fan Meng and I will be regarded as inconsiderate guests. Will be blacklisted by the brothel and will be severely punished. Arbor blinked, took out a bag of spirit coins from his pocket and threw it at them. You just want money, right? Alright, get out of the way. Fan Yu stood pitifully by the door, hugging the bag of spirit coins without saying a word, and his head hung low. Hello. Arbor put his two little paws behind his back and tilted his head to look at her. She saw that kid raise his head, and his eyes were full of pitiful tears. He looked like he was bullied by her but also a bit humiliated. Thinking of her impatient attitude when she spoke before, it seemed that she was indeed a bit disrespectful. Arbor coughed lightly, walked to the table and sat down. He said expressionlessly, all right. Serve the tea. Leave after the time it takes to burn a stick of incense. This restaurant was really baffling. It actually had such a strange rule that customers had to stay here for the time it takes to burn a stick of incense. Could it be that customers couldn't leave if the tea wasn't good? Instead of focusing on the quality of the dishes, they had to resort to unorthodox methods. For example, setting up an erotic dance stage in the lobby. What was the point of that? Fan Yu smiled through his tears and happily came forward to wash his hands and make tea for him. Fan Meng began to play the zither for him. After the song ended, Arbor glanced at him. He seemed to play well, but she had always liked to listen to fast-paced music. This kind of slow music sounded like a lullaby, and the more she listened to it, the more she wanted to sleep. Alas, thinking about how he had to waste his good sleep time like this, Jojo felt a bit of heartache. What did you play just now? Darling Xiao's face was expressionless. Fan Meng covered her mouth with her sleeve and secretly chuckled. This little customer in front of him was really strange. Usually, the customers who pretended to be elegant in their restaurant would pretend to be very knowledgeable, even if they didn't understand the tune he played. But this little girl asked what tune it was with a calm expression, not at all thinking that she would be ridiculed if she asked. This is young Master Songfeng's new tune from the ancient tune of yearning. Miss Chiao's expression was calm as if she had never heard of lovesickness before. She replied with an "oh," and didn't continue the conversation. Fan Yu handed her a cup of hot tea and asked with a smile, Do you want some snacks? Why are you eating snacks in the middle of the night? Arbor glanced at Fan Yu expressionlessly. As soon as the little fellow stopped talking, the atmosphere in the room fell silent. However, the two of them were used to visiting brothels and were used to seeing all kinds of guests. They were used to adjusting the atmosphere, so they weren't afraid of the little fellow's stoic face. As Fan Yu brewed the tea, she chatted with Arbor in a good mood. Miss, isn't yearning tune nice? It's a so, Arbor said faintly. It's not as refreshing as Golden Spear tune. His decadent voice made her feel a little drowsy. Pfft. Refreshing? Little girl, are you sure you're not here to make fun of me? Yearning tune expresses the strong feelings between a man and a woman, and the whole tune is lingering with faint sadness. It's about a female general falling in love with a young master from a scholarly family, but it's hard for her to express her love. The female general went around in circles, but before she could express her feelings, she was sent to the battlefield by the great king. She returned from the battlefield, and that young master committed suicide for love. Chapter 2157. Arbor glanced at Fan Yu. It's hard to confess your love? Yes, it's obvious that you like him very much, but you're stubbornly refusing to confess. Arbor looked at him thoughtfully. Then, What if you feel very happy when you see someone? Fan Yu was startled, then smiled. Ah, the little girl has someone she likes. Arbor nodded vigorously. I didn't jump out from a crack in a rock, of course I have someone I like. Fan Yu chuckled and nodded. Then have you confessed to him? Confessed? Arbor thought for a moment and shook his head. Every time Prince Mo would say to him, Jojo, I like you. Then he would naturally say, me too. This shouldn't be considered a confession. Arbor blinked. Is there still a need to confess? Fan Yu and Fan Meng leaned closer to her and nodded. Of course there's a need to confess. Since you like him, you have to confess. If you don't confess, how can you let the other party know that you like him? Yes, not only do you have to confess, many girls will personally sew something they like and give it to the other party. Yes. The tone of the conversation changed, inexplicably becoming cheerful. Arbor, however, didn't realize it. He thought about their words and nodded. What you said makes some sense. But what do girls usually give? I embroidered a lotus for him in the past and he liked it very much. Arbor turned to look at Fan Meng. What do you give your lover? Fan Meng covered her mouth and chuckled. Naturally, I'll give him whatever he likes. Arbor looked up at the ceiling and thought hard. He's never said that he likes anything in particular. He likes everything I give him. Why don't I plant a lotus for him? Fan Meng. Fan Yu couldn't help but want to laugh. This was the most interesting girl he had met in a long time. Since he likes everything, then there's no need to give him anything. Arbor nodded. I think so too. At this point, the awkward atmosphere between the three of them had become much more harmonious. Fan Yu and Fan Meng helped her think of a solution, such as how to confess to Prince Mo and how to present it to him. Unknowingly, half an hour had passed. As for the Crown Prince, who had angrily gone to the House of Spring to capture his wife, not long after he and Shichen ran onto the street, they encountered a small group of assassins. The other party had come in a hurry, and there were only 20 or so people in total. All of them were 10th level Spirit Realm experts. Even in Shuntian Prefecture, this was not a small force. However, to Emolian and Hichin it was clearly too weak. The assassins came quickly, but so did Tong and the others. Within a few minutes, there was no need for Emolian to personally take action. Tong led a group of secret guards and took care of these small flies in a matter of minutes. Emolian stood there gloomily. Hichin couldn't help but laugh. It's the middle of the night, and you're being assassinated the moment you go out on the street. I'm afraid that the other party isn't joking, right? If this was not a joke, then what was it? Just a few kittens, what could they do? Master, please punish us. Tong led a group of people and knelt on one knee in front of Emolian with some fear and trepidation. Prince Emo waved his hand and said, You may leave. Yes. It looks like they've planted spies around you. A small action in the middle of the night attracted assassins. Hichin smiled faintly. However, this person obviously doesn't have enough brains. Chapter 2158. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent these small fries to assassinate him. No matter what, they had to transfer over 1,000 people. Otherwise, how could they surround and kill the Crown Prince? Emolian glared at that guy. This damn guy looked like he wanted to see the world in chaos. Hateful. It's not bad that he could come out in the middle of the night and transfer so many people in a hurry, Emolian said indifferently. Oh, it seems that you already know who made a move against you. Now, he's still in Shuntian Prefecture, coincidentally has a grudge with me, and his brain isn't very bright. Who else could it be? That heir of Jianpain Wang family? Hichin blinked. Emo, what's his name again? Emo Kuan, Emolian said indifferently. Hichin nodded and looked at him with a playful expression. In your Emo family, other than you, is there anyone else with a slightly higher IQ? Emolian snorted and turned to look at him. Of course there is. Hichin made an N sound. Emolian didn't say anything else. With a frown, his figure flashed, and he headed toward the House of Spring not far away. Just as the two walked into the House of Spring's lobby, they attracted the gasps of the crowd. Heavens, House of Spring is indeed Shuntian Prefecture's #1 brothel. Look, 2 more peerless beauties have come. Wow, they're better looking than the 10 great handsome men in the brothel. Yes, among the 10 great handsome men, only young Master Song Feng can compare to them. Not good enough. Emolian's gaze swept across the lobby and saw a group of fools drooling at him and Hichin. The 2 men's faces darkened, and a trace of annoyance flitted through their hearts at the same time. In this hall, not only were there fat men, there were also many women. Beside them sat delicate and weak officials to keep them company. They were drinking wine, playing music, and singing. If the two didn't suddenly appear at the door, the music wouldn't have stopped. Emolien's handsome face completely revealed a dark expression that this little guy really had guts. She dared to barge into such a lousy place. Oh, where did this little beauty come from? Come and give me a hug. A fat official wearing a scholar's hat walked towards Emolien with a jug of wine in his hand. However, before he could approach, Crown Prince Emo swatted him away with a black face with a flick of his sleeve. He heavily hit the corner of the table, then bounced off the table and fell to the ground. He groaned in pain while holding his waist. You. Why did you hit me? Emolien's eyes sharpened, and a trace of fire suddenly ignited between her fingers. Wow. Spirit Master. The fat squire was so frightened that he cried out in alarm. He scrambled backwards and cupped his hands to beg for mercy. Young master, please spare my life. This lowly one has eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive me. Emolien coldly glanced at him, and the crimson flame in her hand slowly calmed down. He chin-clicked his tongue and asked cheerfully, Have you seen a little girl with a stoic face? Everyone saw that the two of them didn't come with good intentions, so they didn't dare to provoke them. They hurriedly nodded and talked at the same time. Yes. She went upstairs with Fan Meng and Fan Yu. Yes. Fan Meng and Fan Yu are greeting the little girl. What the hell were Fan Meng and Fan Yu? The two men looked at each other. A trace of danger flashed across Emolien's deep phoenix eyes. He wanted to laugh and spread his hands helplessly. This little guy is courting death. Chapter 2159. Spring filled the room. A rich wine aroma slowly wafted through the room. Fan Meng's slender fingers appeared as tender as spring onions under the lantern light. Arbor didn't pay attention to the wine he poured and held his teacup pensively. From their meaning, they were going to take the initiative to confess to Lien? Would he be happy if Miss Chow blinked her eyes? How could he understand her feelings if he didn't confess? Was it like this? But in the past, when she didn't say anything to him, he was able to understand her in a second. In that case, it looked like there wasn't much difference whether she said it or not. Gurgle. Fan Yu filled Miss Chow's teacup with hot water. She propped up her chin with one hand and squinted at the little girl in front of her. It was very strange. In this kind of bustling city, it was as if the little girl was sitting by the lakeside and enjoying the scenery. Her body was untainted by dust, and her stoic face was expressionless. She really was a good-looking little girl. She wondered what kind of person the man she liked would be. He should be very blissful. Bang! The sudden sound of the door being kicked open, accompanied by the startled cries of a flock of orioles and swallows, instantly broke the tranquility and elegance of the room. Many handsome young men who didn't mind the commotion rushed over and shouted all at once. Aya, you scared this baby to death. General Jia is showing off his might. Wow. It's Shuntian Prefecture's Tiger Pendant Camp's General Jia. He looks so mighty. Is that pretty little stoic? Tiske, I don't know why, but when I see this stoic face, I suddenly have a feeling that my heart is moved. Go shit yourself. Which outstanding person isn't moved when you see one? So hateful. I'll slap you to death if you talk like that. Miss Chow put down her teacup with a bang and abruptly stood up with a slap on the table. A green vine swiftly darted out of her sleeve and abruptly whipped the person's chest. Wah! Cries came from the surroundings. They saw that Tiger Pendant Camp's General Jia was sent flying by the little stoic's whip. He crashed into the opposite room with a bang and directly smashed the door. Wah! The little stoic is mighty. This little girl with a stoic face is really good at martial arts. A crowd of clowns stood on both sides of the doorway, cheering, clapping and waving flags at Arbor. The little girl felt a headache coming on. She really didn't know what was wrong with Yi Lingmin to bring her to such a messy place. Young Master Songfeng is here. Quickly move aside. Young Master Songfeng is here. The noise of the crowd could be heard outside the door. As the two groups of people retreated, Arbor raised her head and saw the man who had been flirtatious and smiling at the entrance walking towards her. Along the way they were accompanied by laughter that sounded like background music. While everyone was grinning from ear to ear, the little stoic's expressionless face somehow felt especially comical. What happened? Next to young Master Songfeng, the handsome man in red with half of his thigh exposed and his snow-white skin was using his sleeve to cover his chin and mouth. He was staring at them with great interest. At this time, someone had already helped General Jia up. This General Jia, who looked very formidable with his unshaven beard, was a bit funny now. It wasn't a glorious thing to be thrown out of the door for picking a fight. Under everyone's watchful eyes, such a big guy was sent flying with a single slap. How shameful. Chapter 2160. General Jia's face was bruised and swollen, and his expression was also very displeased. He glared at Xiao Mu with bulging tiger-like eyes as he panted heavily, unable to say anything for quite a while. General Jia is angry. Will the little stoic suffer a loss? Suffer a loss? You must be joking. Have you ever seen the little stoic suffer a loss since just now? Everyone. Indeed they hadn't. They had only seen this stoic face toss people out very intimately. They really hadn't seen her suffer a loss before. Young Master Song Feng glanced speechlessly at General Jia and coughed lightly. General Jia, what are you doing? General Jia glowered and pointed at Arbor as he shouted, She, this little girl, what right does she have to sit on my fan Meng and fan you? This general is so angry. He, the Grand General of Shuntian Prefecture's Peng Tiger Battalion, actually didn't call for his top hostess to serve him when he came here to drink with prostitutes. What right did a little girl who hadn't even grown out her hair yet have to invite two great beauties? Arbor? Everyone's eyelids twitched when they saw her withdraw a beam of lush green wood spirit energy from her hand. Stop. The man in fiery red clothes hastily reached out to stop her from exerting force. Don't smash it. This building can't withstand 2 smashes from you. Fan Meng, who finally had a pleasant chat with Miss Qiao, hastily stepped forward and said, General Jia, this is our young master's arrangement. Would you like to come another day? Why should I come another day? So long-winded. Arbor impatiently glanced at the middle-aged general, and the spirit energy in her hand surged. She was already very angry. Just as she was about to toss this so-called general down the building, she caught sight of Yi Lingmin standing outside the crowd in men's clothing out of the corner of her eye. Yi Lingmin. Stop right there. Arbor shouted angrily and turned around, abandoning everyone. He flew out of the crowd with a whoosh and swiftly chased after Yi Lingmin. Little girl. Fan Meng exclaimed. However, the little girl was like a wisp of smoke, instantly moving away from their eyes. Young Master Song Feng frowned slightly. Just as he was about to follow them, he saw 2 bodyguards with bruised noses and swollen faces running up the stairs and crying pitifully, Young Master, it's bad. There were 2 fiends outside. He fought his way up. The red-clothed man rolled his eyes speechlessly. What's wrong with you today? Why are all kinds of people here? As he spoke, everyone felt their eyes light up. 2 slender figures quickly floated in front of them. The Crown Prince's face turned even darker when he saw all kinds of beautiful men on the 2nd floor. Yuan Shurchen couldn't help but burst into laughter. She turned her head and looked around. Call your person in charge out. Yo, young masters, do you want to join the spring house? A middle-aged woman in the crowd couldn't help but tease. Emolien's severe gaze swept over, instantly stifling that woman's shrill laughter into her throat. The scene was instantly dead silent. Young Master Song Feng leisurely walked out of the crowd and glanced at the 2 people with a smile. That's me. Do you have any advice for me, young masters? Yuan Shurchen sized up this charming young master in white from head to toe, then silently glanced at the black-faced Prince Emo. Hand over the little stoic. So he came to find the little stoic girl. Realization dawned on everyone. Chapter 2161. Young Master Song Feng was slightly taken aback, then he laughed and said, You 2 must be joking. That little girl is so skilled that she can come and go as she pleases in our building. How could I, a lowly person, possibly stop her? Hu Shurchen looked at them with a grin. Where did she go? In the next second, that smiling expression disappeared and was replaced by an indifferent one. If you don't speak honestly, I'll tear down your building in a bit. What? I don't, sir. Emolien. He had a headache as he looked at these coy male escorts and reached out to press his aching head. His wifey running to this kind of place in the middle of the night was truly rebelling. Young master, our spring full house is a legitimate business, the man in red shouted indignantly. How can you be so unreasonable? Young Master Song Feng blocked the red, orange, yellow, green, blue and purple people who were filled with righteous indignation. He glanced indifferently at Emolien and Hu Shurchen and cupped his hands. Masters, please don't play with this small shop anymore. That little girl just now followed someone to the rear courtyard. How about we go over and take a look now? Lead the way, Emolien growled impatiently. General Jia, whose face was flushed from drinking, suddenly interrupted angrily and asked, "Who is that little stoic to you? And who are you?" A severe glint flitted through Emolien's eyes. When everyone saw that General Jia wanted to recklessly reason with someone, they promptly reached out to stop him. General, calm down, General. Who are you?" Hu Shurchen leisurely swept that general a glance and raised the corners of her eyes. Unexpectedly, it was as if General Jia was possessed. When he saw Hu Shurchen's handsome face with a faint smile, he actually became absent-minded and wanted to pounce on her with a drooling face. "Beauty, this general is Shuntian Prefecture's Tiger Pendant Battalion's general." Slap. A heavy slap landed on General Jia's originally somewhat swollen old face. Everyone truly felt sorry for the general. Hu Shurchen's slap from a distance wasn't light at all. 2 teeth were swept out and General Jia was so shocked that he screamed. That General Jia still wanted to say something, but unexpectedly another slap came on his right cheek. Pah! The slap landed heavily, knocking out 2 of his right big teeth. Now both sides of his face were symmetrical and swollen, squeezing his eyes into slits. Being beaten to the point of looking for teeth all over the floor, this was probably the kind of situation that the female orioles and swallows felt their hearts skip a beat and silently shut their mouths. How terrifying. Hurry up and lead the way. Emolien glanced coldly at young Master Song Feng, feeling very unhappy. Without another word, young Master Song Feng turned around and walked towards the backyard. Everyone followed and went downstairs. When they arrived at the back garden, they saw a figure standing behind the rockery from afar. When the crowd walked over, they saw the young lady with her back facing them. She shouted angrily, "Yi Lingmin, why aren't you coming out? Why did you leave me here?" Emolien was about to quickly walk over when she suddenly saw the young lady pinch out a talisman seal. She suddenly raised her arms, and dozens of tracking talismans and revealing talismans scattered from her hands. Bang! When everyone heard the sound, they abruptly turned their heads and saw a figure appear beside the flower path. She was wearing cyan men's clothing, but the hat on her head was knocked to the ground, revealing a head of fine black hair. Sure enough, it was a woman. Did the little stoic miss barge into the House of Spring for this woman? Young Master Song Feng was startled and raised his head to look ahead. Chapter 2162. The clear and cold moonlight shone on the green ripples at the edge of the pool. The little stoic turned around. On her snow-white face, her eyes were like 2 cold stars as she stared straight at the woman who was sitting paralyzed on the ground. Her eyes didn't conceal the icy glint that resembled an icy bolt of lightning. "I let you off last time, yet you still dare to appear in front of me." The little stoic coldly said, "Yi Lingmin, today I'll get rid of you, this calamity, on behalf of my sect." Arbor suddenly paused, and his gaze followed the faintly flowing moonlight and landed on Emolien. "Husband." The little fellow finally saw her dark-faced husband and floated to the man's side in a flash. She looked up at him and asked, "Why did you come?" Ma Shurchen helplessly face-bombed and chuckled. "Instead of sleeping in the middle of the night, you came to this red light district. It'd be strange if Emolien could sit still." When he mentioned this, the little stoic was immediately displeased. "Husband, where did you run off to in the middle of the night?" Emolien couldn't help but laugh in exasperation. This little fellow even learned to complain first when the guilty party was the victim. "Tong came to find me to discuss something." Emolien reached out to pinch her small face with a grin. "This isn't the main point. The main point is that when I returned to my room to take a look, my wifey actually disappeared." Arbor felt a bit guilty and hastily turned his head to look at Yi Lingmin, who was still unable to move after being struck down by talisman energy. "It's her. She threw a small stone at the window. She brought me here." "Husband, this restaurant is really strange," the little stoic said softly, her fingers sliding over the back of the man's hand. "You have to be careful." "Restaurant?" "Everyone, dot." Yi Lingmin clenched her teeth and suddenly moved. However, she didn't run away. Instead, she pounced at General Jia like a gust of wind. "Jia Wu, accept your death." General Jia narrowed his old eyes as he stared at the pouncing Yi Lingmin and couldn't help but fly into a rage. "Who are you?" Without another word, Yi Lingmin stabbed her sword thrice. However, after being hit by the tracking talisman, she was forced to reveal herself. At this moment she was still somewhat exhausted and weak, so the spiritual energy she sent out seemed to be somewhat weak. General Jia's skills were about the same as hers. Although he didn't have much ability to retaliate in front of the little stoic and Emolien, he could still deal with Yi Lingmin, an elementary rank spiritual cultivator. She kicked Yi Lingmin in the stomach, causing her to take a few steps back. Yi Lingmin turned to look at Arbor. Junior sister, take him down first. I'll let you punish him as you wish. Who is he? Arbor asked with a frown. On the surface, he is the general of Shuntian Prefecture's Pengtiger camp, but according to my investigation, this person is the deputy commander of Gung Pengcheng's private army, the Shuntian Guard. So that was the case. Yi Lingmin had probably lured her here to capture this Vice Commander Jia. Arbor released Mo Lian's hand and jumped in front of General Jia. General Jia was completely jolted awake by Yi Lingmin's fright. When he heard Yi Lingmin expose his identity, he was infuriated, but he was completely unable to stop her from continuing. After glancing at the little stoic, he abruptly turned around and wanted to escape. What kind of joke was this? This stoic face still had two formidable helpers. If he didn't leave now, when would he? Unfortunately, he had just turned around when his left leg was grabbed by a vine. He looked down and saw a green vine coiled around his left leg. Someone exerted force and he was abruptly pulled to the ground. With a bang, he smashed into the ground like a dog eating shit. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.